Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
When Tsukiyomi Naraku opened her eyes, the first thing she felt was an unprecedented softness, a warm, fragrant, and soft body in her arms. The woman's hair brushed against his cheek, carrying a sweet, cloying fragrance. It took him a full 3 seconds to realize he was still alive. Memories are like torn film, the screeching sound of brakes, the weightlessness of being thrown through the air, the excruciating pain of shattered bones, and then this moment. He looked around and his consciousness gradually returned. This is a room in typical Edo period style, with the paper sliding door half open, revealing a corridor that is vaguely visible from the outer room. Several paper lanterns were lit inside, casting dim, yellowish shadows on the tatami mats. The walls were adorned with ukiyo-e-style erotic paintings, and the exquisite screen was embroidered with cherry blossoms and cranes. The air was filled with the sense of incense, alcohol, and a certain indescribable sweet and fishy smell. The bedding beneath me was made of expensive silk, and it felt cool to the touch. In one corner of the room stood a gajang, a traditional huxia zither, and on a small table next to it were an empty wine pot and 2 wine cups. But what's most eye-catching is the woman in his arms. She was nestled against his chest, her kimono loosely open, revealing her fair shoulders and neck. Her skin shimmered with a pearly glow under the light. What am I? He murmured to himself, his voice hoarse and unfamiliar. An ancient brothel? How did I end up in a place like this? Fragmented memories began to surge in his mind, memories that didn't belong to him. A pampered young nobleman whose family is suddenly attacked by a monster flees in panic with his wealth. Somehow he ends up in the capital and enters this brothel. Young Master Naraku. The woman in his arms suddenly stirred, her voice soft and sweet with a languid magnetism. She raised her face and looked at Tsukiyomi Naraku. It was a face so beautiful it took your breath away. Her skin was like the finest white porcelain, delicate and flawless. Her slender eyebrows were slightly upturned, and there was a tiny, bright red beauty mark at the corner of her eye, like a drop of congealed blood. Her eyes were amber, gleaming faintly with gold under the light, and something seemed to be flowing deep within her pupils. Her nose was high and straight, her lips were perfectly shaped, and the color was a natural cherry pink, slightly moist. She looked at Tsukiyomi Naraku with a hint of doubt and amusement in her eyes. For a moment, Tsukiyomi Naraku was so engrossed in watching that he was almost lost in thought. What a beauty! Such beauty is simply otherworldly. Why is young Master Naraku suddenly lost in thought? The woman chuckled, gently stroking his cheek. Are you still drunk? Her fingertips were icy cold, and the touch sent a shiver down Naraku Tsukihiko's spine. Tsukiyomi Naraku was momentarily stunned. He could even feel the warmth of her body through her thin kimono and smell the unique fragrance in her hair, not any kind of floral scent but more like a mixture of spices and metallic notes. What am I? He murmured to himself, his voice hoarse. Then something deep in my mind clicked as if a lock had been opened. A door, a massive bronze door floated deep within his consciousness. The door was covered with runes he didn't recognize, but in the very center were 4 clearly legible Huxia characters. Demon Slayer. Naraku Tsukihiko's heart skipped a beat. Demon Slayer, an anime he followed in his past life, depicting a dangerous world filled with cannibalistic demons. Ordinary people are like walking snacks, and even members of the Demon Slayer Corps cannot escape death. Even the pillars are no match for the upper moon demons. Cold sweat instantly soaked his back. He looked around the Japanese-style room again, combining it with fragments of memories that suddenly flooded his mind, memories that didn't belong to him. The original owner of this body was a wealthy young master whose family was devoured by a monster. He fled in panic with his money and somehow ended up in this brothel. I've been transported to the world of Demon Slayer. The thought made Tsukiyomi Naraku feel dizzy. If that's true, then his current situation is practically a hellish start. The survival rate for ordinary people in this world is pitifully low, let alone for someone like him who is now in such a place of pleasure. Just then, the woman in his arms stirred. She stared at him curiously. His eyes were beautiful, like glass, with a faint golden luster in the pupils. Young Master Naraku, what's wrong? Her voice was soft and sweet, with a languid quality from just waking up. Tsukiyomi instinctively tightened her arms around her, her fingers inadvertently squeezing her breast, soft and warm to the touch. The movement was entirely instinctive, but he froze the next second, because the woman in his arms changed her expression. She was slightly taken aback at first, and a very faint blush rose to her cheeks, an instinctive physiological reaction. But then, a flash of cold anger appeared in those beautiful eyes. The way she looked at Tsukuyomi Naraku was no longer that of a mere customer but rather. It's like looking at a piece of meat. Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart skipped a beat. That beautiful face, that signature beauty mark under her eye, those amber eyes that gleamed with gold. A chill ran down my spine and straight to the top of my head, that face. He feels like he's seen it somewhere before. It seems to be an anime in a manga in that world overrun by cannibals, a world of blood and cruelty. Daki. He uttered the name almost silently in his mind. Upper Moon 6, the sixth of the 12 demon moons, is a blood demon who manipulates ribbons and is known for her beauty and cruelty. The woman in his arms was Daki, this face, that beauty mark, this unreal beauty. Holy shit. He roared inwardly, this is Daki, Upper Moon 6. The bronze door in his mind suddenly trembled and shone brightly. Key character detected, Daki Upper Moon 6, disguised identity, courtesan Warabiheim, current affection level, 8, regarded as food plaything, strategy progress, 0%. Ability can be copied. Blood Demon Art Ribbon Manipulation unlocked at 50% affinity. Note, the two demons are one, the elder brother Jutaro is hidden in a hairpin. Affection level 50 unlocks. Blood Demon Art Ribbon Manipulation Beginner. Affection level 100 unlocks. Permanent passive skill, Ethereal Charm plus 30 warning. The target is extremely dangerous. Please immediately consider a survival strategy. Host detected to be in an extremely dangerous situation. Newbie gift pack issued in advance. Please select one talent to enhance. 1. Alluring eyes enhances the attractiveness of your gaze and increases persuasiveness. 2. Exceptional demeanor enhances the aura of a superior, inspiring awe even in ghosts. 3. Graceful figure optimize physique and enhance external charm. 4. Breath of Equality makes you no longer seen as mere food by demons but retains your alluring qualities. Rare option. Tsukuyomi Naraku hesitated almost without hesitation. Choose 4, choose 4. In this cannibalistic world, nothing is more important than not being eaten. Selection confirmed, talent Breath of Equality is merging. A warm current spread from her chest to her whole body, and Tsukuyomi Naraku felt a subtle change, not external but an adjustment in her inner temperament. He looked at Daki and noticed that the anger in her eyes had faded, replaced by confusion. You. Daki frowned slightly, her fingers gently pressing against Tsukuyomi Naraku's chest. You're quite bold, but... She applied slight pressure with her fingertips, and Tsukuyomi Naraku felt a sharp pain. However, I'm in a good mood today, so I'll let it go for now. She suddenly laughed again, but there was little warmth in her smile. After all, this is the first time I've met someone as interesting as young Master Naraku. She emphasized the words interesting. Tsukuyomi Naraku forced herself to calm down. He knew he had to say something, or he might really become someone's meal. Please forgive me, miss. He tried to make his voice sound calm. You are simply too beautiful for me to resist. Daki's affection level -2, currently 6. Damn, you can actually lose weight? That's overdoing the flattery. Tsukuyomi Naraku quickly adjusted his strategy. According to the original work, Daki and Jutaro were bullied because of their humble origins and ugly appearance, so they might have a special empathy for those who are discriminated against. He took a deep breath, a bitter look in his eyes. Actually, I didn't mean any harm to you just now, I was just thinking about some things from the past. Oh, Daki raised an eyebrow, seemingly intrigued. What is it? Does the young lady know that I come from the Tsukuyomi family of Kanto? Tsukuyomi Naraku began weaving lies, combining fragments of the original owner's memories with some of her own experiences. My family has been generals for generations, passing down martial arts as a family tradition. My father was a renowned samurai in the area and my brothers were all highly skilled in martial arts. He paused deliberately, observing Daki's reaction. The playfulness in her eyes faded, replaced by a hint of focus. But Tsukuyomi Naraku smiled bitterly. I've been frail since childhood and dislike martial arts. Instead, I prefer reading, calligraphy, music, chess, and painting. What my father finds even more distasteful is my appearance. He touched his face. In her past life, her father was indeed from a Bajiquin martial arts school. However, she didn't like practicing martial arts. Instead, she preferred painting and playing teamfight tactics. Furthermore, the original owner of this body was indeed handsome, even somewhat effeminate. This statement was 7 parts truth and 3 parts falsehood, revealing her true feelings. My father often said that my face was neither male nor female, a disgrace to the samurai family. My brothers also mocked me, saying I was unworthy to be the son of the Tsukuyomi family. Tsukuyomi Naraku's voice lowered, carrying a genuine sense of loss. Once I tried to learn swordsmanship, but I clumsily fell to the ground. In front of all the retainers, my father said, "You might as well become a geisha, at least your face can earn you some money." This was something Tsukuyomi Naraku made up on the spot, but he said it so naturally as if he had really experienced it himself. Daki's expression clearly changed. The coldness in her eyes melted somewhat, replaced by a complex emotion resonance. Daki's affection, +10, currently 16. Hint, triggering the resonance point experience of discrimination will greatly increase favorability. Tsukuyomi Naraku felt a surge of joy and continued. So when I see someone as beautiful as you, miss, yet living in this place, I truly empathize with you. People always judge others by their appearance and their background, but they don't know that everyone has their own hardships and helplessness. He deliberately made his description of being here vague, referring both to Daki's identity in the brothel and alluding to her situation as a demon. Daki fell silent. She sat up, her kimono slipping off her shoulders, but she didn't care, only staring at Tsukuyomi Naraku. "You mean," her voice was soft, "that you understand my situation?" "I wouldn't dare say I fully understand," Tsukuyomi Naraku said cautiously, glancing unconsciously at her slipping clothes. "But at least I know that beauty can sometimes be a curse. People only see the exterior but not the inner pain and struggle." These words struck almost directly into the deepest part of Daki's heart. As the daughter of a former courtesan, she was admired for her beauty, but also envied and bullied because of it. Even after becoming a demon, although she gained power, the feeling of being objectified never disappeared in Muzan's eyes. She was just a tool. Daki's affection level, +8, currently 24. A smile suddenly appeared on Daki's lips, unlike her previous coquettish and perfunctory demeanor. This time the smile was much more genuine, and even the red lines at the corners of her eyes softened a bit. "Lord Naraku is quite an interesting person." She raised her hand to stroke his cheek, her fingertips cool yet gentle, her fingertips tracing his smooth skin. "But you said your family was attacked by a monster." Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart tightened. She knew the real test had arrived. This demon was clearly testing him. The fear from his primal memories didn't need to be acted out. He instinctively clenched his sleeves, his brows furrowed, and his voice carried an undisguised pain. "Yes, overnight they were all gone, father, mother, brothers. I hid in the closet, only seeing shadowy figures darting about and hearing the crunching of bones being chewed." He paused deliberately, his voice trembling. "That voice, I'll never forget it in my entire life." "Then you're very lucky." Daki's fingers slowly slid down, stopping at the artery in his neck, her fingertips gently pressing, feeling the wildly pounding pulse beneath his skin. Her tone was devoid of emotion, yet it sent a chill down Tsukuyomi Naru's spine. It was the predator's scrutiny of its prey, only now tinged with amusement. "Indeed lucky." He forced himself to remain calm, even tilting his head slightly to look directly into her eyes, his tone carrying a self-deprecating yet firm tone. "So I told myself, since I've survived, I have to live well, even if this world is full of dangers, even if there are cannibalistic monsters everywhere." The moment the word demon was uttered, a strange light flashed in Daki's eyes and the pressure on her fingertips faltered slightly. "Do you believe in ghosts?" "I saw it with my own eyes, I couldn't help but believe it." Tsukuyomi Naraku's eyes were open and honest, even carrying a hint of detached indifference. "But sometimes I think, if demons eat people, aren't people also devouring each other? The powerful oppress the common people, the strong bully the weak. In the end, it's all just the survival of the fittest." These words clearly struck a nerve with Daki. As a ghost, she was feared and loathed by humans, but she knew better than anyone the filth and cruelty of the human world. Dimensional gate notification. Affection +6, current affection, 31, agreement established, unlock new status. Fun toys, Daki's current state of mind. This human is not only good-looking but also interesting to talk to. I'll keep him around for a while and eat him when I get tired of him. At least we're safe for now. Tsukuyomi Naraku breathed a sigh of relief but maintained a melancholy expression on her face. "However, the road ahead is uncertain and I have nothing of value. The only thing I have left is probably this face that my father despises the most." He gave a self-deprecating smile. "It's ironic, really. The very thing that once subjected me to so much contempt has now become my lifeline." Daki looked at him, her eyes filled with complex emotions. The human in front of me is indeed different from the others. He possessed a peculiar sense of contradiction. He was gentle yet not cowardly, handsome yet unassuming. In particular, his non-food attraction both intrigued her and made her want to get closer. This conflicting feeling was something she had never experienced since becoming a ghost. "If..." Suddenly Daki spoke, her voice as gentle as moonlight. "If I could give you a chance to live and even to gain power, would you be willing?" Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart pounded wildly. He knew perfectly well what that implied to become a ghost. But he couldn't agree immediately, it was too suspicious. He raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. What does miss mean? It's just a possibility. Daki didn't say it explicitly but turned and walked to the window. The moonlight shone on her, making her as beautiful as a fragile bubble. Young Master Naraku, I have a suggestion for you. You don't need to wander around anymore. She turned around, her smile alluring yet carrying an air of undeniable authority. Stay in this building. I'll arrange a fine room for you. With me looking after you, no one in the capital will dare to harm you. A thought struck Tsukuyomi Naraku. This place might not be safer than this, but he maintained a perfectly measured look of surprise, which quickly transformed into a smile that went along with it. Oh. Then I'm truly indebted to Miss Warabi, but wouldn't that be too much trouble for you? Trouble? Doki chuckled softly, walked up to him, and took out a silver hairpin from her sleeve, the head of which was engraved with delicate cherry blossom patterns. She personally placed the hairpin in his lapel, her fingertips casually tracing his chest. Wear this, from now on you belong to me. Her tone carried a hint of possessiveness, yet it was as if she were speaking to a beloved toy. Come to my room at this time tomorrow and bring some interesting stories. I love listening to stories. Of course I will obey. Tsukuyomi Naraku nodded, his tone carrying the casualness expected of a wealthy young master, without excessive respect or the slightest resistance. He knew that the hairpin was both a protective charm and a shackle. From now on, he had become the evil spirit's property, but at least for the time being, he no longer had to worry about becoming its meal. At that moment, a maid entered from outside, bowing respectfully. Lady Warabi, the room is ready. Shall we take Prince Naraku there now? Daki waved her hand, her gaze lingering on Tsukuyomi Naraku's face for a moment, a hint of amusement in her eyes. Go on, get some rest. Don't even think about running away. Kyoto's so big you can't escape. Tsukuyomi Naraku followed her maid out of the room without looking back. He could feel the gaze on his back, as if it were a tangible presence clinging to him. That's the gaze of a predator on its toy, filled with interest, yet also harboring the danger of devouring everything at any moment. Stepping out of the main house, the Kyoto night enveloped the courtyard, and lanterns under the eaves swayed, casting dappled shadows. Tsukuyomi Naraku took a deep breath. Besides the scent of cosmetics, there was also a faint, almost imperceptible smell of blood in the air. He gripped the silver hairpin on his lapel, the bronze gate silently floating in his mind. Current status, host, Tsukuyo Naraku talent, breath of equality beginner, skills, none target, Daki affection 31-100. Current identity, Daki's toy, security level, low, survival countdown, unknown, being kept as a pet by an upper moon demon. This is unprecedented. Tsukuyomi Naraku thought to herself, but her steps didn't falter. But it doesn't matter, as long as I survive, I'll accept being treated like a toy or even a pet. Once I max out my favorability and unlock my skills, I'll roam freely in this demon slayer world. The maid led him to an elegant room, exquisitely furnished, even more luxurious than the bedroom in his original memory. Young Master Naraku, please feel free to give any instructions to the servants. The maid bowed and withdrew, gently closing the door behind her. Only Tsukuyomi Naraku remained in the room. He walked to the window, pushed open the paper door, and gazed at the moonlight in the courtyard, his expression gradually becoming solemn. I've taken the first step and established a foothold, he muttered to himself. But this is just the beginning. Daki's favorability rating is only 31, Jutaro is still lurking in the shadows, and the Demon Slayer Corps might come knocking on our door any day. He rubbed his temples. This hellish dungeon is definitely not easy to clear. The moment the paper door closed, Tsukuyomi Naraku immediately rushed to the bronze mirror in the corner of the room. The mirror wasn't perfectly polished, but it was enough to reflect the face he both loved and hated. Her jet-black hair cascaded over her shoulders, with wisps of hair partially obscuring her brows. Her dark red pupils were long and alluring, her nose was high and straight, her lips were sharply defined, and even her jawline was exquisitely sculpted. Holy crap, this face is absolutely gorgeous. Isn't this Naraku, the final boss from Inuyasha? He raised an eyebrow at himself in the mirror, his fingertips tracing his cheek. A face with 92% similarity to Naraku's, in modern times he'd be an instant celebrity, with fans lining up from Tokyo to Kyoto. It's a shame in this demon slayer world, he's relegated to being just ornamental food for demons. What a waste. He tugged at his kimono, made of the finest silk, embroidered with subtle cherry blossom patterns, even more luxurious than the family attire in the original owner's memories. Daki is certainly generous, investing so much in raising a toy. I wonder how long that shelf life will last. Turning around to look around the room, the tatami mats were laid out smoothly, and an exquisite antique shelf stood in the corner, displaying several pieces of porcelain that looked quite valuable. On the low table by the window were writing brushes, ink, paper, and even a plate of fresh Japanese sweets. Behind the luxury, however, lies an indescribable sense of oppression. For example, on the porcelain pieces on the display shelf, a close inspection reveals very faint dark red marks on the edges, resembling dried blood. As expected of Upper Moon Demon territory, even the decorations have elements from horror movies. Tsukuyomi Naraku thought to himself, casually picking up a wagashi and stuffing it into his mouth. The sweet taste melted on his tongue, but it inexplicably reminded him of the coldness of Daki's fingertips. Could this fruit be made of human blood? Oh well, we're already in a den of demons anyway, there's no point in worrying about that. Let's fill our stomachs first. He sat cross-legged on the tatami mat, focusing his attention on the gray door frame in his mind. The dimensional gate floats silently, the 4 characters Demon Slayer still clearly visible above it with its current status listed below. Host, Tsukio Naraku. Talent, Breath of Equality Basic. Demons view you as non-food, retain 90% of your own attractiveness and cannot initiate attacks. Upper Moon demons are exempt from this restriction. Skills, none target Daki Upper Moon 6. Affection level 31-100 status. Interesting toy. Unlock condition. Affection level 50 right arrow blood demon art ribbon manipulation beginner. Affection level 100 right arrow permanent passive skill. Ethereal charm plus 30 current task. None trigger-based tasks will be activated in specific scenarios. An Upper Moon demon is exempt from cannot actively intend to attack. This talent is definitely a trap. Tsukuyomi Naraku clicked her tongue. It means that if Daki gets tired of me one day, she can still kill me if she wants to. This equal perception at most just makes my death a little later. He tried to touch the dimensional gate with his mind. The gate frame rippled slightly, but no new functions were unlocked. What can this lousy system do besides showing favorability and information? There's not even a tutorial, it's definitely a hellish start. Thinking about how to deal with the next day, Tsukuyomi Naraku rubbed her temples. Daki needs to hear interesting stories, but they can't be too deliberate or too ordinary. In the original owner's memories, besides the tragedy of her family's destruction, there were only boring trivia in the aristocratic circles, which obviously could not satisfy the Upper Moon demon's appetite. We need to come up with something interesting. He stroked his chin. It should fit the image of a rich young master and also subtly reflect the experiences of a fallen princess. For example, we could make up a story about a beautiful songstress who was bullied by nobles. Highlighting the helplessness of the oppressed and then adding a plot twist, saying the songstress ultimately exacts revenge on those people, both evoke sympathy and caters to the fallen princess's twisted mentality. Thinking of Daki's hint at gaining power, Tsukuyomi Naraku's feelings became complicated, becoming a ghost. That's definitely a shortcut to survival in this world, immortality, powerful blood demon magic, and no more worrying about being eaten at will. But becoming a ghost means eating people and you'll lose the sun. He frowned. Me, a modern person, gnawing on human flesh. Just thinking about it makes me physically uncomfortable. Besides, after becoming a demon, wouldn't I become completely subservient to Daki? What if she's in a bad mood one day and uses me as a stepping stone, or I get slashed by the Demon Slayer Corps? Wouldn't that be a huge loss? On the other hand, if he didn't become a ghost, he would be a useless piece of trash with a combat power of 0.5. Even with Daki protecting him, if the Demon Slayer Corps comes knocking on his door one day, or if Jutaro takes a dislike to him, he still won't survive more than 3 seconds. This is a classic dilemma. Tsukuyomi Naraku lay sprawled on the tatami mat staring at the ceiling. Option A, become a demon, eat human flesh, survive but lose your humanity. Option B, don't become a demon, be used as a toy, and could be killed at any moment. This hellish dungeon truly leaves no way out. He suddenly remembered something and his eyes lit up. When watching Demon Slayer in a past life, netizens had a heated discussion about a topic. The spider lily that Demon King Muzan pursued throughout his life was actually always in some inconspicuous place. One highly rated guess suggests that the spider lily only blooms during the day and closes at night, while Muzan, as a demon, can only operate at night, which is why he can never find it. Even more coincidentally, in the original owner's memory, there was a cluster of blue flowers planted at the entrance of the courtyard of her old home. The flowers were shaped like red spider lilies and always bloomed during the day, closing their petals as soon as the sun set. When the original owner was a child, he thought the flower was pretty and often picked it to play with. Holy crap, the netizens were right. Tsukuyomi Naraku suddenly sat up, her mind racing with excitement as the live chat exploded with comments. The Demon King searched his whole life for the spider lily, and it's just growing like weeds in my hometown. This is practically a cheat code with a god's eye view. The effects of the red spider lily are not explicitly stated in the original work, but netizens speculate that eating it can help demons overcome sunlight and even grant them greater power. For Tsukuyomi Naraku, regardless of whether he could overcome the sunlight, this flower was absolutely crucial to his survival. If I can find that patch of spider lilies and eat a lot of them, I might gain the power to resist demons. Even if I'm forced to become a demon later, I can retain my humanity and even be unafraid of sunlight. The more he thought about it, the more feasible it seemed. Besides, the original owner's hometown wasn't too far from Kyoto. Although there are evil spirits on the road, as long as I'm careful with my breath of equality talent, I should be able to get through. But a problem arises. He is now Daki's toy and has no freedom to leave Kyoto. If he suddenly proposes to return to his hometown, it will definitely arouse Daki's suspicion. We have to take it slow. Tsukuyomi Naraku calmed down. First, I need to raise the favorability to 50 and unlock the ribbon manipulation skill. Once I have the ability to protect myself, then we can talk about other things. Then find a suitable excuse such as I want to go back to my hometown to retrieve one of my mother's belongings and slowly persuade Daki. Anyway, she finds me interesting now, so she probably won't refuse me easily. He clenched his fist, his eyes hardening. What the Ghost King pursued his entire life, a transmigrator snatched away. This is a huge win. Once I obtain the spider lily, even when facing Daki and Jutaro, I won't have to live in constant fear like I do now. The moonlight outside the window gradually deepened, while the lanterns in the courtyard continued to sway. Tsukuyomi Naraku lay on the tatami mat, plotting her next move, complaining about the hellish start while simultaneously feeling a sense of anticipation. After all, to be able to survive in the Demon Slayer world solely through the imagination of netizens and a Naraku-like face is an experience that is unprecedented and likely to remain so. He yawned. I'll get some sleep first, recharge my energy, and tell Princess a good story tomorrow. As for the spider lily, it'll be mine sooner or later. In the darkness of night, the sweet aroma of wagashi Japanese sweets filled the room, and the porcelain on the display shelves reflected a soft glow. Tsukuyomi Naraku closed her eyes, and she could almost hear faint wails and howls of ghosts in the distance, but she was no longer as terrified as before. He knew he had found the only shortcut to survival in this cannibalistic world. As the morning light spilled over the rooftops of Kyoto, Tsukuyomi Naraku followed her maid through a deep, dark corridor, the paper doors tightly shut, cutting off the outside light. As I walked into Daki's courtyard and pushed open the last heavy wooden door, a warm and pleasant fragrance wafted towards me. The room was completely dark, with heavy, dark curtains hanging on all four walls. Several whale oil lamps burned in the corner, their warm yellow light spilling onto the tatami mats, making the furnishings appear even more exquisite and adding a touch of stickiness to the cool air. He glanced at it discreetly. The window cracks were sealed shut with fine velvet, not even a sliver of morning light could penetrate. He understood immediately. As expected of a ghost, it really can't stand the sunlight. The thought only flashed through his mind before he suppressed it, his face still bearing that casual, gentle smile. "Good morning, Miss Fern Princess." He raised his hand in a bow, his gaze sweeping over the figure sitting upright at the low table in the center of the room, and his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Today, Princess Daki changed into a smoky purple kimono, with dark gold intertwined branches embroidered on the collar. Her black hair was loosely tied up and secured with only a black jade hairpin, with a few stray strands hanging down her neck, making her face appear even more pale and eerie. The crimson floral pattern on her left cheek gleamed softly under the warm light. Her eyes, as they moved, possessed a natural allure, yet also carried an aloofness that kept strangers at bay. Tsukuyomi Naraku had to admit that, setting aside his identity as an upper moon demon. That face was indeed breathtakingly beautiful. Even he, a modern man well aware of its dangers, couldn't help but feel a little distracted. Of course, this is on the premise that we ignore the fact that she might devour us at any moment. Young Master Naraku is indeed punctual. Daki looked up, her fingertips twirling a glistening grape. The warm yellow light fell on her eyelashes, casting a soft shadow. Her voice was still soft and charming, but it sounded a bit languid than the night before, clearly indicating that she had just woken up. Tsukuyomi Naraku sat down naturally opposite her, his gaze casually sweeping across the four corners of the room. There were no gaps letting in any light, and the flame of the whale oil lamp burned steadily without a ripple of wind. Clearly, this room was a dark place specially prepared for her. He didn't say anything, but simply took the teacup from the maid. Only when his fingertips touched the warm cup did he slightly suppress the restlessness in his heart caused by being so close to the beautiful woman. Knowing I'd be telling the girl some interesting stories today, I certainly wouldn't dare to be negligent. He smiled warmly, his tone carrying a sincere expectation. I pondered this for half the night and finally managed to piece the story together a bit. Oh, Doki raised an eyebrow, leaning forward slightly, her crimson lips curving into an alluring smile. Then you'd better tell me properly, young master, lest I wait in vain. Naraku Tsukuyomi composed herself and began to refine the story she had already conceived. There was once a place called Kinglan Town where there lived a girl named Ziyunyang. Although her family was poor, she was very beautiful. Many of the neighbors were jealous, and the gossip reached the ears of the local powerful man. She caught the eye of a powerful local lord and was forcibly taken into his mansion. But once the novelty wore off, her life became worse than that of a servant. To please his newly acquired favorite concubine, the powerful lord commissioned her to embroider 100 beauties painting, depicting the faces of all the concubines in the manor. However, he left no space for her, and instead had the concubine burn a scar on the back of her hand with a scorching hot silver hairpin. They said someone as lowly as her wasn't worthy of embroidering with clean hands. He deliberately slowed his speech, his eyes carrying just the right amount of compassion, his fingertips even tightening slightly as if he were experiencing the pain himself. The concubines in the mansion went even further. Some mixed sand into her embroidery thread, some deliberately spilled dye and ruined her embroidery, and some even secretly cut off the embroidery needles that she cherished most, left by her mother. The embroiderer wept every day, yet dared not resist. She hid all her hatred in her heart, and at night by the moonlight she practiced on the cloth with a red-hot iron needle. She wanted to embroider a piece that could take lives. Daki's breath hitched slightly, and her fingertips unconsciously clenched the hem of her kimono. The scars on the back of her hand, a cherished possession trampled upon simmering resentment. These details, like needles, pierced the memories buried deep in her heart. She looked up at Tsukuyomi Naraku, the playfulness in her eyes lessened, replaced by genuine focus. Naraku Tsukuyomi observed this, secretly pleased, and continued. She spent 3 months secretly collecting evidence of crimes committed by everyone in the mansion. Account books of corrupt officials, dregs of medicine used by a favored concubine to poison his former wife, and letters in which the concubines framed each other. Then, she used a specially prepared poisonous herb juice to dye the thread and embroidered a Manjusaka hell picture. Each petal of the flower corresponded to a person's sin. The stems were embroidered with silk thread soaked in aphrodisiacs, and tiny poisonous needles were hidden in the flower's heart. On the day of the banquet, the powerful and wealthy made her display her embroidery in front of everyone, hoping to embarrass her in front of everyone. The embroiderer stepped forward, holding the embroidered screen. With a gentle tug, the screen unfolded, releasing a sweet fragrance that enveloped everyone in a dreamlike state. The powerful see themselves being hunted by creditors. The favored concubine sees the ghost of her former wife haunting her, and all the concubines who had wronged her see themselves pierced by countless embroidery needles. He lowered his voice, his tone tinged with coldness. The pain in the illusion is real. Some people are driven mad with fear, some are tearing each other apart, and some die by running into a wall. Amidst the chaos, the embroiderer used a needle hidden in her sleeve to slit the throat of the powerful man. She didn't kill anyone else. She simply set fire to the cannibalistic mansion, then, draped in red and carrying the embroidery needle her mother had left her, disappeared into the night. At this point in the story, a brief silence fell over the room. The flame of the whale oil lamp flickered, reflecting on Daki's face and making the crimson pattern on her left cheek appear even more eerie. Her eyes shone with an astonishing light, carrying a hint of excitement, a touch of resonance, and a subtle longing. That's it. She pressed on, her tone clearly tinged with lingering curiosity. Where did she go after she disappeared? Did she encounter anyone even more powerful? Will those who survived seek revenge? Don't be in such a hurry, young lady. Tsukuyomi Naraku put down her teacup, and seeing the genuine interest in her eyes, she couldn't help but feel a strange unease. This demon was indeed breathtakingly beautiful. Even her current ferocious appearance possessed a deadly allure. He suppressed his inappropriate thoughts, a sly smile playing on his lips. There's more to this story, but I was too tired to think about it last night. Daki's eyes widened suddenly, filled with disbelief. You came up with all of this yourself? Yes. Tsukuyomi Naraku shrugged, feigning nonchalance, her tone tinged with self-deprecation. I've been frail since childhood, unable to practice martial arts, and I don't like reading. My only hobby is daydreaming about the flowers and plants in the garden, making up stories to pass the time. In his mind, however, he was frantically thinking, this melodramatic revenge plot could be made into a 20-episode TV series in modern times. Surely it wouldn't be able to hold on to you, this upper moon demon. Dimensional gate hint, affection plus 5 current affection, 40 strong resonance plus strong interest. Daki's current state of mind, this story written by a human is indeed interesting. The bullet's retaliation, the ruthlessness hidden beneath the weak exterior. It's practically describing myself. I have to make him come up with a sequel quickly. I never knew you had such abilities. Daki's tone softened, the fierceness in her eyes fading, replaced by genuine appreciation. Then what are you standing there for? Hurry up and think of what to do next. As she spoke, she leaned forward, the hem of her crimson kimono brushing against his knees, her cool breath brushing against his ear, carrying a faint, refreshing fragrance. Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart skipped a beat. That face was indeed breathtakingly beautiful. Her alluring yet cold aura made one's heart flutter even knowing she was a man-eating demon being stared at so closely by her. He deliberately shrank back, a hint of embarrassment on his face, his ear tips turning slightly red. With you staring at me like that? I'm a little embarrassed. Excuse me, Daki seemed to have heard something interesting, raising an eyebrow as she sized him up. A flicker of annoyance crossed her eyes, quickly replaced by a mocking smile. It's just asking you to make up a story, what's there to be shy about? Having lived for so long, she had only ever seen humans in her presence either filled with fear or fawning. This was the first time she had ever seen someone dare to show such an expression in front of her, and yet this expression, paired with his handsome face, somehow amused her. It's not the girl's fault. Tsukuyomi Naraku lowered her eyes, her voice soft, tinged with genuine embarrassment. Is it because you are so beautiful, young lady? Looking at me so closely, I can't help but be distracted. I want to enjoy watching you, but I also want to figure out the story. It's impossible to do both. That's a bit of a lie. He was indeed afraid of being eaten, but he was also genuinely attracted by Daki's beauty, and he even secretly enjoyed being teased by her like this. It's like dancing on a knife's edge, dangerous yet exhilaratingly dangerous. Daki was clearly amused by these words. She paused for a moment, then chuckled softly, the red lines at the corners of her eyes softening with amusement, and even the chill emanating from her seemed to lessen. You certainly know how to talk. She reached out her fingertip and gently poked his cheek, the cool touch carrying a hint of teasing. But, are you serious? Of course it's true. Tsukuyomi Naraku looked up at her, his eyes filled with undisguised amazement. In all my years, I have never seen anyone with such breathtaking beauty as you, young lady. To look at you even for a moment feels like a desecration, let alone to think under your gaze. In her mind, however, she was furiously complaining. Tsukuyomi Naraku, you're such a sucker for good looks. Have you forgotten she's a man-eating demon? Once she gets tired of you, you'll be the first one she eats. But he couldn't help saying that he'd wait until he was stronger. This is probably what they mean by being blinded by beauty, even if the other person is a ghost. Dimensional gate hint, affection plus 4, current affection, 44 joy plus budding affection, Daki's current thoughts. This human is not only interesting, but he also appreciates my beauty so well. He's much better than those guys who only know fear or greed. Let's tease him and see what his reaction is. Daki suddenly leaned closer, almost trapping him between the chair back and herself. The hem of her crimson kimono draped over his legs, and her cool fingertips twirled a strand of his black hair. Her face was incredibly close to his, her crimson lips nearly touching his nose. Her voice was as soft as honey, carrying a deadly allure. Since I'm distracting you, then how about? She paused deliberately, watching Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart race, her smile deepening. If I give you a kiss, can you hurry up and think of what to do next? Cold sweat instantly beaded on Tsukuyomi Naraku's back, his heart pounding as if it would explode. Fear and excitement intertwined, making his whole body tense. He feared this was Daki testing him, feared she would bite his throat off at any moment. Yet looking at her exquisitely beautiful face so close to his, feeling the cool fragrance emanating from her, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He turned his face away in feigned panic, his ears burning red, his voice stammering, Miss Young Lady, please, please don't. Oh, Doki chuckled softly, her fingertips gently pinching his earlobe. The cool touch sent a shiver down his spine. What, I'm being so good to you and you're still not happy? Number. Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart was pounding so hard it made him dizzy. His heart was screaming in despair. This isn't teasing, this is clearly testing my willpower. The upper moon demon's beauty is truly deadly. But he could only force a smile and feign innocence, I just feel. This intimacy is far too inappropriate. Doki laughed even harder, her eyes practically overflowing with mockery. She straightened up, sat back down opposite him, but her gaze remained fixed intently on him. Her fingertips traced a cool line across the low table. Then hurry up and think of what to do next. I don't have the patience to wait long. If you can't think of anything, she deliberately drawled, a sly glint in her eyes, I'll punish you in my own way. Tsukuyomi Naraku secretly breathed a sigh of relief, yet couldn't help feeling a pang of disappointment. His secret hope had ultimately been dashed. He picked up his teacup, took a sip to calm his nerves, and his mind raced, rapidly forming a sequel to the story. Don't worry, young lady. After leaving the mansion, the embroiderer encountered a mysterious old woman who taught her an even more powerful embroidery technique, capable of bringing the illusions within her embroidery to life. Later, she met a group of women like herself who were oppressed by the powerful and wealthy, and together they formed an embroidery workshop dedicated to helping those who had been wronged to seek revenge. However, they've recently run into trouble. The workshop has caught the attention of the local government. I haven't yet figured out how to deal with it. The government? Doki raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. How will they deal with the government? Will they use their embroidery to kill, or will they run away? It's a secret for now. Tsukuyomi Naraku looked at the expectation in her eyes, and the flutter in his heart caused by her beauty became more and more obvious. He knew that he was probably crazy, that he could actually feel affection for a man-eating demon. But he also knew that this affection was based on the premise that he wouldn't be eaten for the time being. Once he lost his usefulness, he would still be a plaything in her palm. He suppressed the complex emotions in his heart and smiled slyly. I'll tell you when I've thought it all through, but if you keep staring at me like this, I'm afraid I'll never finish thinking about what happens next. Doki chuckled softly, her eyes softening considerably. All right, I won't stare at you. She rested her chin on her hand, her gaze still fixed on his face, a hint of languid admiration in her eyes. Take your time thinking, I'll wait. Looking at her exquisite profile and listening to the faint sound of the whale oil lamp burning, Tsukuyomi Naraku suddenly had a bizarre thought. If she weren't a demon, perhaps. This would be a wonderful encounter, but he quickly dismissed the thought. He glanced at the tightly closed paper door, remembering the fact that she couldn't bear the sunlight, that she was an Upper Moon 6 demon and the humans she had devoured. Dimensional gate hint, affection +1, current affection 45, keep an eye on this, high interest. Unlock new status, a worthwhile source of amusement, Daki's current state of mind. This human is not only a master storyteller, but he's also quite handsome, perhaps. I could consider not killing him and keeping him around for amusement. Seeing the system notification, Tsukuyomi Naraku felt a little more at ease. With affection level exceeding 45, I'm getting closer to unlocking the ribbon manipulation skill. He knew that now was not the time to indulge in lust. The matter of the red spider lily had to be put on the agenda as soon as possible. Only by obtaining that legendary flower can he truly possess the power to contend with evil spirits in this hellish dungeon, and only then can he enjoy this deadly beauty without fear. He looked up at Daki, his eyes still holding a perfectly measured, gentle smile, but in his heart he was calculating. Next time I tell a story, or maybe later when I see an opportunity, I'll mention going back to my hometown to get the embroidery thread. After all, he couldn't wait to get that flower from the other side of the river that could change his fate. Tsukuyomi Naraku picked up his teacup, his fingertips tracing the warm porcelain surface. The warm yellow light cast a soft shadow on his eyelashes. He looked at Daki's gaze, which remained fixed on his face, a gaze filled with obvious interest and anticipation. Like a child staring at an unfinished bedtime story. Speaking of which, he suddenly began, his voice casual, does the young lady ever get bored? Daki was slightly taken aback, clearly not expecting him to ask that question. She tilted her head slightly, twirling a strand of hair between her fingers, and said languidly, bored, of course there are times when I'm bored. It's the same faces coming and going in this building, saying almost the same things. It gets really tedious after a while. What does that girl do when she's bored? Tsukuyomi Naraku leaned forward, her eyes as earnest as a curious student's. She can't just stay in this room all day, can she? Not really. Doki raised an eyebrow, her gaze sweeping over the gyukin in the corner of the room. I sometimes play the gyukin, or I have my maids find some new and interesting things. A few days ago, someone sent me a talking parrot. It was so noisy, I threw it away after only 2 days. She spoke casually, but Tsukuyomi Naraku caught a fleeting hint of annoyance in her tone. Like a little princess locked in a magnificent cage, surrounded by fine clothes and delicacies, yet restless with boredom. This discovery stirred something within him. Dimensional gate notification, target's emotional fluctuation, board status confirmed. It seems the young lady does indeed need some new entertainment. Tsukuyomi Naraku smiled, setting down her teacup. I do know an interesting game, simple and fun and good for passing the time. Oh, Daki became interested, leaning forward slightly. What game? It's called Fingertip Treasure Hunt. Tsukuyomi Naraku stretched out her hands, palms up. It's simple, I'll hide a small item in either hand. You guess which one it is. If you guess correctly, you can ask me a question, anything if you guess wrong. He paused deliberately, a sly glint in his eyes. You'll have to answer my next question and then I'll play a trick on you. How I'll play the trick is up to the winner, but it mustn't hurt. Daki was taken aback at first, then chuckled, the red lines at the corners of her eyes turning mocking. Lord Naraku, do you take me for a 3-year-old child, this kind of game? Don't rush, girl, Tsukuyomi Naraku interrupted her, her eyes turning serious. The interesting thing about this game is that you have to follow the rules. You can't look while hiding, and you can't use any abilities to see through the clues while guessing. It's purely based on luck. Once you use any means you shouldn't, the game loses its meaning. He observed the princess's expression and continued, I know that you are of extraordinary status, and it would be easy for you to see through my tricks. But what's the point of that? The fun of games lies in their uncertainty, in the anticipation of that moment and the surprise of the answer being revealed, like not knowing how to guess the ending of a story. Daki remained silent for a moment, her gaze shifting across his face. She could sense the human's intentions. It was both a test and an attempt to please, but strangely she didn't seem to mind. On the contrary, the feeling of being treated as an ordinary person was novel and somewhat attractive to her. She couldn't remember how many years it had been since anyone dared to play around with her like that. The humans either trembled with fear, fawned over them, or were charged at by members of the Demon Slayer Corps wielding swords. Games like this are lighthearted, even a little childish. All right, she suddenly spoke, a smile playing on her lips. I'll play a few rounds with you, but let's make it clear first. If you cheat or deliberately let me win, I'll be angry. Of course. Tsukuyomi Naraku was secretly delighted but maintained a calm demeanor on the surface. He took a small silver button from his sleeve. This was taken off my kimono last night. The edges are rounded so it won't hurt your hands. Then, let's begin the first game. He put his hands behind his back, closed his eyes, and moved so slowly that Daki could clearly see the trajectory of his hand switching. Switch from left hand to right hand, then back to left hand, and finally extend both hands into fists in front of you. Girl, guess which hand it's on? Daki stared at the two identical hands. Her blood demon arts could indeed easily pinpoint the button's location, but she refrained from doing so. It wasn't because of these human rules, but because she herself wanted to try it out to see what it would feel like to guess. Left hand, she said. Tsukuyomi Naraku opened her left hand empty. I'm sorry, young lady, you guessed wrong. He smiled gently. Then, according to the rules, I may ask a question and… He paused, seemingly contemplating how to tease her. Daki looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. What would this human do? Tsukuyomi Naraku reached out and gently pinched Daki's earlobe with her fingertips. Its texture was cool and smooth like the finest jade. Daki's body stiffened slightly. This feeling was far too unfamiliar. It wasn't pain, it wasn't a threat, but rather a strange sensation. Human fingertips are warm and soft, and the pressure they apply to the earlobe is very light, even slightly ticklish. She had never been touched like that before. As a ghost, touching usually means killing or devouring. Even in human times, few people would pinch her earlobe so gently. This unfamiliar touch left her somewhat at a loss. In the question, she suppressed the slight unease in her heart, her tone deliberately indifferent. Ask away. What's your favorite color, young lady? Tsukuyomi Naraku withdrew her hand and asked a trivial question. Daki was taken aback, clearly not expecting this question. She thought he would ask about more private matters such as her identity, her past, and her powers. Red, she replied, her fingertips unconsciously tracing the patterns on her left cheek, the red of blood. Dimensional gate hint, affection +2, current affection 47. Daki's current state of mind, this game, is more interesting than I imagined. The question he asked. Why does it feel so strange when he touches me? A little itchy and actually quite comfortable. Round 2, Tsukuyomi Naraku again put her hands behind her back, this time faster. Guess which hand? Daki stared at his hands, this time carefully observing his movements. Although she couldn't see exactly where it was hidden, she noticed the slight tightening of his right hand fingers. Right hand. Tsukuyomi Naraku opened her right hand, a button lay quietly in her palm. The girl guessed correctly. His smile remained unchanged. Now it's the girl's turn to ask a question. Daki looked at him, her eyes filled with complex emotions. She did guess correctly, but not through any special ability, but through observation. This feeling, which relied purely on observation and intuition, reminded her of a game she played long ago when she was still human. You. She paused, then asked her first question, why aren't you afraid of me? Tsukuyomi Naraku hadn't expected her to ask that directly, but he was prepared. Of course I'm afraid, he said frankly. The young lady is breathtakingly beautiful, yet carries a deadly danger like a poisonous poppy. Even knowing that getting close will lead to death, one still can't help but want to look at her again. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with just the right amount of sincerity. But what I fear even more is that I will never see your face again, never hear your voice again, and never finish telling those unfinished stories. This answer, though only half true, precisely struck a chord with Daki. She enjoys being appreciated, needs, and being seen as unique by others. Smooth talking, she muttered, a smile involuntarily creeping onto her lips. So, she reached out and mimicking him gently pinched his earlobe. As she made this movement, she suddenly realized. The feeling of pinching someone else's earlobe is completely different from the feeling of being pinched. Tsukuyomi Naraku's earlobes were warm, with delicate skin that would turn slightly red with a gentle pinch. She inexplicably recalled the itchy feeling when she was pinched earlier, and her fingertips lingered for a moment longer than usual. The third game. Tsukuyomi Naraku remained unfazed and continued the game. He lost the third game. Go ahead and ask, young lady, he said, shrugging nonchalantly. You. Daki asked more directly this time, what do you want from me? Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart tightened, but her expression remained calm. I want to live, I want to stay by your side, I want to see you every day. Haven't you already given me all of that? He paused, then added, if I had to say what else I hope for, it's that the girl will always find me interesting and won't get tired of me so quickly. As he spoke, he deliberately turned his head to the side. According to the rules, the girl can play a trick on me. Daki stared at his face, which was so close to hers. That face was indeed beautiful. Her skin was fair and delicate, and her eyebrows and eyes were exquisitely painted. She reached out again and pinched his cheek this time. The touch was warm and soft, brimming with human vitality. This feeling is strange. She's pinched many people's faces, usually crushing them, but this gentle, slightly playful touch was a first for me, and she discovered that she actually enjoyed the feeling of touching others. Your face is quite soft. She withdrew her hand, her tone carrying a gentleness she herself was unaware of. In the fourth round, Tsukuyomi Naraku won. It's my turn. He looked at Daki and asked a seemingly casual question. When you're bored besides playing the zither, what else do you think about? Daki remained silent for a moment. This question, though seemingly simple, touches on a part of her that she rarely shares with others. It reminds me of the past. She wasn't being dismissive for once. It reminds me of certain people, certain places, certain times that can never be relived. She spoke vaguely, but Tsukuyomi Naraku could sense the genuine melancholy in her tone. Dimensional gate hint, affection +3, current affection 50, unlock achievement, blood demon art ribbon manipulation beginner. Skill description. Due to the special connection between Daki and Jutaro, who are one and the same, the host obtains the original blood demon art ribbon manipulation, evolvable. Currently, up to 3 ribbons can be controlled for simple attacks, defense binding, consuming stamina. After repeated use, this blood demon art has a chance to evolve into Jutaro's blood scythe form. Note, evolution requires the following conditions to be met. 1. Achieve an affinity level of 80 or higher with Daki. 2. The blood demon technique has been used more than 100 times. 3. The host's own understanding of negative emotions such as anger and resentment reaches a certain level. Tsukuyomi Naraku was startled. Ribbon manipulation. It can even evolve into Jutaro's blood scythe. This system's reward is absolutely amazing. I didn't expect to collect them all so quickly. Looks like I can change my plans. But he remained outwardly calm, showing no sign of anything amiss, simply looking at Daki gently. It sounds like you're someone who cherishes the past. Daki didn't reply, but simply gave a soft "hmm." In the 5th round, Daki lost. According to the rules, Tsukuyomi Naraku reached out, and this time he pinched Daki's other earlobe again. When his fingertips touched that cold skin, he could feel Daki's body tremble noticeably. The reaction was more pronounced this time than the first. Daki herself was stunned. Just now, the sensation from her earlobe wasn't just itchy, but also a strange tingling feeling that spread from her earlobe to the back of her neck, causing her to subconsciously shrug her shoulders. This feeling was so unfamiliar to her that she didn't even know how to describe it. She just felt that the feeling wasn't unpleasant. My question is, Tsukuyomi Naraku withdrew her hand, then asked a more probing question. What do you find most boring in this world? Daki thought for a longer time this time, seemingly trying to calm down the inexplicable feeling she had just experienced. Disguise. She finally answered, her eyes turning cold. Human disguise, ghost disguise, and the disguise of having to keep living. This answer sent a jolt through Tsukuyomi Naraku. He could hear the genuine weariness in her voice. Would a ghost who has lived for over 100 years also feel that living is a burden? The game continued for several more rounds, with the questions gradually becoming more complex. Whenever it was Tsukuyomi Naraku's turn to tease her, he would choose to pinch Daki's earlobe. He noticed that Daki's reaction to this touch was becoming increasingly obvious. From initial stiffness to later slightly shrugging her shoulders, there was even a time when, after he finished massaging her, Daki subconsciously raised her hand to touch her earlobe, a look of confusion flashing across her face. She seemed puzzled as to why this place was so sensitive. By the end of the 10th round, the initial wariness and mockery on Daki's face had vanished, replaced by a rare, relaxed smile. She even proactively asked, "Want to play again?" Tsukuyomi Naraku glanced at the sky outside the window. Although there was no sunlight in the room, she sensed it was almost noon. "That's enough for today," he said with a smile. "The game should leave something to look forward to. That makes it even more fun next time." Daki pursed her lips, seemingly still wanting more, but she didn't press the matter. "Young lady," Tsukuyomi Naraku spoke up, her tone casual as if in conversation, "speaking of which, when I was making up that story about the embroiderer, I felt like I was missing a crucial piece of embroidery thread. The kind of silk thread that only grows near my hometown, the kind that dyes a particularly vibrant red. If we could obtain that thread, the sequel to the story would surely be even more captivating." He observed Daki's expression, and seeing that she didn't immediately object, he continued, "It's a pity my hometown isn't close to the capital. This round trip will likely take several days. However, if it can add color to your story, young lady, it's worth it." Doki raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement flashing in her eyes. "You want to go back to your hometown to get your embroidery thread? It's just a thought." Tsukuyomi Naraku showed a hint of regret at the opportune moment. "After all, I am now your person, so naturally I must obey your arrangements. If you don't allow it, then I'll just make do with ordinary silk thread." This statement was skillfully crafted. It made a request while leaving the decision entirely to Daki, and also implied that "I'm doing this for your sake." Daki stared at him for a moment, then suddenly smiled. "Granted," she said, her tone as casual as if she were granting a trivial request. "However, someone has to come along. I don't want you to get eaten by some idiot on the way, otherwise I'd lose an interesting person to amuse myself with. Thank you, young lady." Tsukuyomi Naraku was overjoyed inside, but outwardly only smiled gently. "Then I will depart tomorrow and return quickly. No rush." Doji waved her hand, taking a blood-red jade pendant from her sleeve and handing it to him. "Wear this, and if you encounter any foolish brats on the road, they naturally won't dare approach. As for the person following you," she paused, "let me go, she's quite clever." Tsukuyomi Naraku remembered her as a quiet, always-headed maidservant to Daki. Now it seemed she was probably not human or even an ordinary person. Yes, he took the jade pendant, and when his fingertips touched its cool texture, he could feel the pressure of an upper moon demon contained within it. "Come back soon." Doki looked at him, a complex emotion flickering in her eyes. "I'm waiting to hear the rest of the story." "Definitely." Tsukuyomi Naraku bowed and left the room, feeling the gaze following him from behind. Stepping out of the courtyard, moonlight spilled onto the veranda. He gripped the blood-red jade pendant tightly in his hand, and the image of the blue flowers that only bloomed during the day flashed through his mind. The red spider lily. I finally had the chance to get it. Inside the room, Daki sat alone at a low table, her fingertips gently tracing the earlobe that had just been pinched. There seemed to be lingering warmth from human fingertips, and that strange, tingling sensation. She frowned and pinched her earlobe again. This time she pinched it herself, and it felt completely different. There was no strange, tingling sensation. "What's going on?" she muttered to herself, a hint of confusion flashing in her eyes. This unfamiliar feeling made her uneasy, but for some reason she also felt a little wanting to try again. "Tsukuyomi Naraku." She murmured the name, her fingers unconsciously stroking her earlobe, a hint of confusion she herself didn't realize appearing on her face. This human is indeed becoming more and more interesting. Even this strange touch is becoming interesting. As the first rays of dawn shone through the eaves, Tsukuyomi Naraku had already finished tidying up. He specifically chose to set off during the day. This is the safest time of day. Demons are afraid of light, and even upper moon demons choose to be active at night. He put on the dark blue kimono that Daki had prepared for him, fastened the blood-red jade pendant to his waist, and carefully checked his luggage again. Some gold and silver, dry rations, water pouches, and a packet of embroidery thread samples for camouflage. He was stunned when he pushed open the door. At the end of the corridor, that crimson figure stood silently. The fallen princess had arrived. Today she wore a light cherry-colored outer garment, her long hair loosely tied up, and the vermilion floral pattern on her left cheek looked particularly alluring in the morning light. This outfit was less glamorous than usual and more aloof, but it was still breathtakingly beautiful. More importantly, it's daytime now. Naraku Tsukuyomi's gaze swept past her side, the eaves of the corridor deliberately extended, casting deep shadows, and she happened to stand in the darkest part of the shadows, avoiding all direct sunlight. Even so, her ability to appear in broad daylight is enough to demonstrate her strength. "Why are you here, young lady?" He strode forward, his tone filled with genuine surprise. Doki raised her eyes, her gaze sweeping over him before finally settling on the jade pendant he wore at his waist. "Let's see how your preparations are going." Her voice was gentler than last night. "Remember, find a place to stay by evening and try not to travel at night." She paused, then added, "Also, you must wear that jade pendant with you at all times, never let it leave your side." Tsukuyomi Naraku glanced down at the jade pendant, then looked up at her. Morning light filtered through the gaps in the corridor, casting dappled shadows on her face. Unusually, her exquisitely beautiful face lacked its usual coquettishness or mockery. Instead, it held a, almost serious expression. A sudden, inexplicable tremor ran through him. Dimensional gate hint, target's emotional fluctuation, concerned status confirmed, is the young lady. "Concerned about me?" he asked softly. Daki was slightly taken aback, then turned her face away, a faint blush rising at the tips of her ears. Whether from embarrassment or something else, it was unclear. "Don't flatter yourself. I just don't want my toy to die out there before I've had enough fun with it." Despite saying that, she didn't leave immediately. Instead, she took a small brocade pouch from her sleeve and handed it to him. "Here are some emergency medicines and a simple map of the area around Kyoto if you encounter any trouble on the road. You can try mentioning my name." Tsukuyomi Naraku took the brocade pouch, and as her fingertips touched her icy hand, the strange feeling in her heart intensified. This demon is actually quite cute. The moment the thought popped into his head, he was startled. An upper moon demon who feeds on humans, someone who could crush him at any moment, he actually finds the other cute. He must be completely bewitched by that face. But seeing the unnatural blush on Daki's profile, and her feigned indifference yet deliberate act of seeing her off, Tsukuyomi Naraku couldn't help but curl the corners of his lips into a smile. "Thank you, young lady." He put away the brocade pouch and said earnestly, "I will definitely return safely and tell you the rest of the story." "HMPH, that's for the best." Daheim waved her hand. "Hurry up, don't be late, Plum is already waiting for you at the door." She turned to leave but then stopped and looked back at him. His gaze was complex and difficult to decipher. It contained warning, expectation, and a hint of emotion that Tsukuyomi Naraku couldn't understand. "Remember, don't go out at night." "Yes." Watching her blushing figure disappear into the depths of the corridor, Tsukuyomi Naraku stood still for a moment. Her fingertips unconsciously caressed the jade pendant at her waist, which seemed to still retain her scent, cold, yet carrying a strange sense of comfort. If he didn't eat people, he might actually be a decent person. He shook his head, suppressing the dangerous thought. Now is not the time for idle thoughts, getting the spider lily is the priority. Outside the side gate of the brothel, a simple carriage had been waiting for some time. The coachman was a silent middle-aged man. When he saw Tsukuyomi Naru, he simply bowed respectfully without saying a word. The person standing beside the carriage was none other than Mei, mentioned by Daki. She was a girl who looked no more than 14 or 15 years old, dressed in a dark blue maid's uniform, her hair neatly combed into a bun, and wearing a half-silver mask that covered her face from her forehead to her right cheek. The exposed left side of his face was delicate and pale, with eyes that were calm to the point of being empty. "Lord Naraku," she bowed slightly, her voice calm and even. "I am Ume, accompanying you on your journey at the behest of Lady Warabi." Tsukuyomi Naraku nodded, his gaze lingering for a moment on the mask on her face. The mask was exquisitely crafted, with fine silver patterns inlaid along its edges, but it was clearly used to conceal something. "Thank you for your trouble, Miss May." The two boarded the carriage, the driver cracked the whip, and the wheels rolled over the cobblestone road, slowly driving out of the streets and alleys of Kyoto. The interior space is not large, but it is furnished fairly comfortably. Tsukuyomi Naraku sat by the window, watching the street scene recede into the distance through the gap in the bamboo blind. Mei sat upright opposite him, her hands folded on her knees, her eyes fixed straight ahead like a delicate doll. The silence lasted for about 15 minutes before Tsukuyomi Naraku decided to speak first. He needed to get to know this fellow traveler and pave the way for the journey ahead. "How long has Miss May been following Miss Fern Princess?" May looked up at him, her eyes beneath the mask calm and unwavering. 3 years. 3 years, then Miss May must know Miss Warabi very well. Tsukiyomi Naraku smiled casually. I'm new here and don't know much about your likes and dislikes. If I offend you in the future, I hope Miss May will enlighten me. May was silent for a moment before slowly speaking. Lady Warabi prefers quiet and dislikes noise. She likes the color red, hates hypocrites, and will protect the loyal but will not protect the traitors. She didn't finish her sentence, but the meaning was already clear. It sounds like Miss May has great respect for Miss Warabi. Tsukiyomi Naraku observed her expression. Although she was wearing a mask, one could sense from her eyes and tone that a glimmer of light would flash in May's almost empty eyes when she mentioned Lady Warabi. Lady Warabi saved me. May's voice remained calm, yet a subtle emotion flickered within it. My life was given to me by you, Lady Warabi. Dimensional gate hint, target information detection, plum position, Daki's personal maid bodyguard status, diehard loyalist loyalty 99-100. Note she has severe facial scars, was rescued by Daki and voluntarily became her follower. She possesses basic combat abilities and can handle ordinary demons. Tsukiyomi Naraku's heart skipped a beat. Saved by Daki, that's interesting. In the original story, Daki's name before she became a demon was Ume, and now there's a girl with the same name, Ume, beside her, wearing a mask to cover her scars. Is it a coincidence, or is Daki deliberately searching for someone similar to her past self? He recalled the expression on Daki's face last night when she mentioned thinking about the past, and that genuine sense of melancholy. Perhaps this girl named May is a projection of some kind of emotion of Daki. A girl who shares a similar experience with her and needs to be saved. Miss May's face. He asked tentatively, is it injured? May's body visibly stiffened and her fingers unconsciously tightened. After a moment she whispered, yes, but it doesn't matter anymore. It's enough that Lady Warabi doesn't mind. These words were spoken plainly, but Tsukiyomi Naraku could hear the bitterness in them. A young girl with severe scars on her face that require her to wear a mask to cover them has likely experienced a lot of bullying and discrimination in this appearance-obsessed era. But Daki saved her, giving her shelter and value. This is practically like Daki saving her former self. I apologize for my abruptness. Tsukiyomi Naraku apologized appropriately and changed the subject. Speaking of which, the place we're going to this time is my hometown, a small village called Tsukiyomi Village. Has Miss Ume traveled far before? Rarely, May said, relaxing a bit. I spend most of my time with Lady Warabi. Then consider this a relaxing trip, Tsukiyomi Naraku said with a smile. The countryside may be simple, but the scenery is beautiful, especially this time of year. The wildflowers in the mountains are blooming, and the air is fresher than in Kyoto. May glanced at him, a hint of confusion flashing in her eyes, as if she didn't understand why he would be interested in things like scenery and air. But she didn't ask any further questions, she just nodded. The carriage continued on its way, the wheels making a rhythmic sound as they rolled over the dirt road. Tsukiyomi Naraku leaned against the window, watching the scenery outside gradually transition from town to fields, but her mind was preoccupied with something else. May is highly loyal and virtually impossible to turn against or bribe. This means that she will truthfully report her every move to Daki throughout the entire process. Therefore, the act of obtaining the red spider lily must be done in extreme secrecy, so that she cannot detect anything amiss. Fortunately, the original owner's hometown did indeed have a special kind of blue silk thread. It was dyed with a local plant called yuko, and the color was bright and long-lasting, making it quite famous in Kyoto. Using getting embroidery thread as an excuse is perfectly reasonable. As for the red spider lily, according to the original owner's memories, that flower grew at the entrance of the old family courtyard, mixed in with a large patch of wildflowers and weeds, completely inconspicuous. It shouldn't be difficult, we just need to pick them secretly when the plums aren't looking. The problem is that the flower only opens during the day and closes at night. Daki instructed him to settle down by evening, which meant he had to complete the gathering within the limited daytime hours and avoid May's sight. Miss May, he suddenly spoke, according to our itinerary, we should arrive at Yuyang village around dusk. We've traveled all day, so why don't we rest in the village for the night and begin our business tomorrow? May thought for a moment, then nodded. All right, but you must promise me that you will not leave your residence after nightfall. Of course, Tsukiyomi Naraku chuckled. I promised Warabiheim that I would never go out at night. When Princess Fern was mentioned, he noticed that May's eyes softened for a moment. Clearly, this girl's loyalty to Daki had reached the level of near faith. The carriage continued its journey, the afternoon sun filtering through the bamboo curtains into the carriage, making it warm and inviting. Tsukuyomi Naraku closed her eyes to rest, but her mind was repeatedly going over her next plan. Pick the flowers, hide the flowers, and return to Kyoto. Every step must be flawless. Meanwhile, in that dark room in Kyoto, Daki was sitting by the window. The window cracks were still sealed tightly, but she seemed to be able to sense the sky outside through the heavy curtains. They should have left the city by now. She murmured to herself, her fingertips unconsciously tracing her earlobe. There seemed to be lingering traces of the touch from last night's game, that strange, tingling sensation. She frowned and dismissed the thought. It's just a fun toy. When he comes back, there will be many more stories to hear. I just hope he really can come back safely. She was taken aback when the thought popped into her head. When did she start caring about the life and death of a human being? After a long silence, she finally got up and walked towards the gyukin in the corner of the room. His fingertips brushed across the strings, but he didn't play. He simply sat there quietly, letting his thoughts drift away. Outside the carriage, the sun shone brightly. Tsukuyomi Naraku opened her eyes, looked at the fleeting scenery outside the window, and gripped the jade pendant at her waist. Red spider lily, here I come. As the evening glow bathed Tsukuyomi village in a warm golden light, the carriage slowly came to a stop at the village entrance. Tsukuyomi Naraku lifted the carriage curtain and gazed at the village before her, a place that felt both familiar and strange. In the original owner's memory, this place was once a symbol of the family's prosperity. Neat courtyards lined both sides of the main road paved with bluestone, and wind chimes hung under the eaves. During festivals, the whole village would gather in front of Yoyong's mansion to celebrate. Now the main road remains, but most of the houses on both sides are dilapidated, many courtyards are overgrown with weeds, and the wind chimes on the eaves are rusty. The most conspicuous building is the largest mansion at the east end of the village. The ancestral home of the Tsukuyomi family was now pitch black, with broken doors and windows and crumbling walls, resembling a huge skeleton lying quietly in the twilight. "Young master, where shall we stay?" Mei's voice came from behind, calm and undisturbed. Tsukuyomi Naraku withdrew her gaze and pointed to the only two-story wooden building in the village still lit up. That's the only inn in Tsukuyomi village. He did not choose to return to his ancestral home. Firstly, it's a haunted house, probably already a place avoided by the villagers. Secondly, in case the evil spirit that attacked the family back then comes back to investigate, living in the ancestral home would be like walking into a trap. The carriage stopped in front of the inn. The innkeeper, a short, stout man in his 50s, was taken aback when he saw Tsukuyomi Naraku, then his eyes widened. You are young Master Naraku." Clearly, the original owner's face was highly recognizable in the village. Indeed. Tsukuyomi Naraku smiled gently. "Uncle Tanaka, it's been a long time." "It really is young Master Naraku." Boss Tanaka's hands trembled with excitement. You're alive. Heaven has eyes. Heaven has eyes." After the Tsukuyomi family was wiped out overnight, everyone in the village thought that the most beloved and delicate young master was already dead. Surprisingly, he survived and came back. "Uncle Tanaka, I need 2 guest rooms for one night." Tsukuyomi Naraku didn't dwell on the past, getting straight to the point. "Also, I'd like to ask you for a favor. Young master, just say the word. As long as it's within my power, I'll definitely help." Boss Tanaka patted his chest and assured him. "I need some embroidery thread, especially the brightest blue silk thread dyed with ghost grass." As she spoke, Tsukuyomi Naraku took out a silver ingot from her bosom. "This is a deposit. The more materials, the better. I need it first thing tomorrow morning. Mr. Tanaka took the money, nodding repeatedly. "Yugaku dyed thread. Yes, that old woman in eyes is the best at this. I'll go talk to her right away. This is troublesome." Tsukuyomi Naraku paused, then added, "Oh right, I also need some flowers for dyeing, you know, the kind with really bright colors that can be used directly to dye fabric. I think there are some near my hometown, but I can't remember the exact location. Do you know them, uncle?" This was his prelude to plucking the red spider lily. Mr. Tanaka thought for a moment. "Bright flowers. Young master, are you referring to the wildflowers on the hillside behind the village? They bloom so beautifully every year around this time with reds, yellows, and blues." "But can those flowers be used for dyeing?" Old Mr. Tan doesn't know. "It's all right, I'll go take a look myself tomorrow," Tsukuyomi Naraku said with a smile. "Just consider it a walk." After settling into their accommodations, Tsukuyomi Naraku and Mei each went to their respective rooms. The room was simple but clean enough. Tsukuyomi Naraku placed her luggage on the tatami mat, and the first thing she did was open the window and look towards the direction of her ancestral home. As dusk deepened, the outline of the ancestral home appeared and disappeared in the dim light of the day. The courtyard entrance. It should be there. He took a deep breath, suppressing the excitement in his heart. He'll be able to get the spider lily first thing tomorrow morning. The next morning, just as dawn was breaking, Tsukuyomi Naraku woke up. He changed into simple clothes that were easy to move in, and when he opened the door, May was already waiting outside. Miss May is up very early, he smiled. Have you had breakfast yet? It's already used. May, still wearing the half-silver mask, spoke calmly. Is the young master going to gather flower materials today? Yes, and I'll also visit my hometown while I'm at it. Tsukuyomi Naraku said casually, although the house is abandoned now, it's still where I grew up, so there's always something to remember it by. After having a simple breakfast, the two headed towards the hillside behind the village. On the way, Tsukuyomi Naraku deliberately slowed down, pretending to admire the scenery, but in reality, he was observing the terrain and the locations he remembered. Speaking of which, Miss May's face. He suddenly began, his tone tentative and distracting. Is the injury very serious? May's body visibly stiffened, and her fingers unconsciously traced the edge of the mask. I apologize for my rudeness. Tsukuyomi Naraku apologized at the right moment, but continued, however, I think Miss Ume doesn't need to care too much about appearance. The truly important people won't change their minds because of their looks, just like Princess Warabi, she never looked down on you, did she? Upon hearing Lady Fern Princess, May's eyes softened for a moment but quickly returned to their usual calm. Young master is right. Lady Fern Princess is my benefactor, she gave me my life. Her appearance is truly unimportant. It's truly a blessing to have a master like Princess Warabi, Tsukuyomi Naraku sighed, while her mind raced with analysis. Judging from May's reaction, her facial injury was probably not just an accident, but likely related to past bullying. Daki saved her, gave her value and a place to stay, which made her develop a loyalty that bordered on faith. As they talked, they had already reached the bottom of the hillside. Just as Mr. Tian said, the place is full of wildflowers of all colors, red, yellow, and purple, swaying gracefully in the morning light. At the edge of that sea of flowers, near the entrance to the courtyard of the Yu family's ancestral home, clusters of deep blue flowers were quietly blooming. Red spider lily, Lycoris radiata. Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart began to pound wildly. He forced himself to remain calm and pointed to the patch of red flowers. Miss May, look at those red flowers, how vibrant their color is. They must be the flowers used for dyeing. May looked in the direction he was pointing and nodded. Indeed, very beautiful. Could Miss May go check over there for me? Tsukuyomi Naraku pointed to the other side of the flower field, where there were several clusters of blue flowers. I want to collect more colors so the dyed threads will be richer. I'll go collect the blue ones, and for the red ones I'll trouble Miss May. Remember, only collect the most vibrant colors. This is the simplest strategy of splitting forces. May didn't doubt it, responded, and walked towards the red flower bushes. Tsukuyomi Naraku watched her walk to the edge of the flower bed and begin carefully selecting flowers before turning and heading towards the blue flower bed. But his attention wasn't on the flowers at all. Instead, he was keeping a close eye on May's movements out of the corner of his eye. May was very focused, examining each flower with her head down, completely unaware of what Tsukuyomi Naraku was doing behind her. Right now, Tsukuyomi Naraku crouched down, pretending to pick flowers, but her right hand quickly reached for the cluster of spider lilies. Instead of picking the flowers, he simply pinched off a few with his fingers and quickly stuffed them into his mouth. The moment the petal touched my tongue, a strange, sweet sensation melted on my palate, followed by a subtle bitterness and finally an indescribable warmth slid down my throat and spread throughout my limbs and bones. Dimensional gate notification. Special substance detected, red spider lily daytime blooming type. Unknown attribute activated, immortal attribute. 1-3. Effect retains willpower in dire straits, increasing the probability of breaking through physical limits by 30%. Current stage, initial awakening. Tsukuyomi Naraku's pupils suddenly contracted. Immortality, preserving an indestructible will, breaking limits. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. In the original story, Tanjiro repeatedly unleashed his full power in dire situations, was beaten to the brink of death countless times but always managed to get back up, and even withstood the Demon King's attack with his human body during the final battle against Muzan. Could it be because of this? The online speculation that red spider lilies are eaten as wild vegetables wasn't a joke after all. He suppressed the shock in his heart and quickly picked a few more spider lilies and stuffed them into his mouth. This time he carefully felt the warm current. Indeed, after each one, a faint but resilient power would emerge within him like some kind of anchor, firmly fixing his consciousness and will. Immortal attribute 2-3, eat some more. Immortal attribute 3-3, right arrow 1-1 max. Effect enhancement. Physique has been altered. The probability of maintaining unwavering will in dire straits and breaking through physiological limits is increased by 100%. Current stage, stable note, the immortal attribute has reached its current limit. Continuing to consume red spider lily will not increase this attribute. However, it can be replenished. When the undying attribute is temporarily reduced due to a desperate situation, it can be restored through sunlight. Tsukuyomi Naraku was stunned. The upper limit is 1. No matter how much you eat, you can only maintain this level. He carefully studied the information in the system prompt. The probability of breaking through physiological limits increases by 100%, which is already quite incredible. Furthermore, he can replenish his energy through sunlight, meaning that as long as he basks in the sun, he can repeatedly unleash his full potential in dire situations. But this seems quite different from Muzan's pursuit of overcoming sunlight in the original work, etc. Naraku Tsukuyomi suddenly realized a possibility. What Muzan wanted might not be simple immortality, but something more advanced, an immortality that would allow him to completely overcome the weaknesses of demons and become a perfect being. Ordinary spider lilies can only provide basic anchoring of will. As for Tanjiro, that guy probably actually eats spider lilies like snacks, which is why he developed that indestructible physique. Young master, is this enough? Mei's voice suddenly came, and Tsukuyomi Naraku snapped back to reality, only to find that Mei had already walked over carrying a small bunch of red flowers. That's enough, that's enough. He quickly stood up and handed over the purple flowers he had prepared earlier. I've picked mine too. Let's go back. We still need to work on the embroidery thread today. Yes. On the way back to the inn, Tsukuyomi Naraku chatted with Mei while secretly sensing the changes within her body. Although his immortality attribute was already maxed out, he could clearly feel that the anchor-like power was settling deep within his body, like some dormant potential waiting to be awakened. More importantly, blood demon art. Last night in his room, he had already tried practicing ribbon manipulation. At first, he could only clumsily make a ribbon sway in the air, but after practicing for 2 hours, he was able to barely control 2 ribbons to make simple movements. Now, after consuming the spider lily, he clearly felt an improvement in his control over the blood demon art, not in strength, but in the precision of his control. Back in her inn room, Tsukuyomi Naraku closed the door and eagerly began practicing. He stretched out his hand, and with a slight thought, 3 pale red ribbons appeared out of thin air from his palm, dancing lightly in the air. Compared to last night's awkwardness, today's control was like an extension of my own limb. The ribbon could bend, rotate, and wrap around at his will, even precisely entangled around a teacup at the other end of the room and steadily carried over. Blood Demon Ribbon Manipulation. Proficiency +5, current proficiency. 37,100, Tsukuyomi Naraku's eyes lit up. After only 2 nights of practice, my proficiency has increased by 37. Moreover, after eating the red spider lily, my practice efficiency today was significantly higher than yesterday. He recalled the evolution conditions mentioned in the system notification, reaching an affinity level of 80 with Daki, using the device 100 times, and gaining an understanding of negative emotions such as anger and resentment. The first 2 conditions are easy to agree to, but the third. Tsukuyomi Naraku frowned. As a modern office worker, where would he get so much anger and resentment? Even if he did, it would be complaints about his boss and clients, not real negative emotions. But it's too early to think about these things now. Let's focus on increasing our proficiency first. He practiced for another hour until a fine sweat appeared on his forehead before stopping to rest. Check the system panel, Blood Demon Ribbon Manipulation, proficiency +8, current proficiency, 45,100. At this rate, with a few more days of practice, I should be able to meet the requirement of 100 uses. As for the favorability rating, it's currently at 50, and I need to raise it by another 40 points. Tsukuyomi Naraku leaned against the wall, starting to plan her next move. The moonlight outside the window was like water, shining on his serene face. The crimson jade pendant at her waist gleamed faintly in the darkness. It was the mark of the fallen princess's presence, a symbol of both protection and surveillance. He slowly opened his left hand, palm facing upwards. With a slight thought, a wisp of extremely faint red energy seeped from the palm of his hand, twisting and condensing in the air, eventually transforming into a slender, translucent blood-red ribbon. The ribbon was about 3 feet long, its edges blurred like mist, and it swayed gently in the moonlight. He stared at the ribbon, his expression complex. This is the blood demon art rewarded by the system, the original ability of Daki and Jutaro. Although it was only in its most basic form, the feeling of controlling energy was incredibly clear, as if the ribbon was an extension of his body. But problems also arose. Once you get back, you absolutely cannot practice anymore. Tsukuyomi Naraku murmured to herself, flicking her fingertips, and the ribbon vanished as a red mist. He couldn't let Daki realize that he possessed the same power as her. Upper moon demons possess perception far exceeding that of ordinary people, not to mention the blood demon art originating from their true form. Once discovered, it will be extremely difficult to explain. How could a human possess the blood demon art of a demon, and it's even her exclusive ability? With that in mind, an even bolder plan came to him. What if I really became a ghost? Once the thought pops into your head, you can't suppress it anymore. Daki had hinted at the possibility of gaining power, and Tsukuyomi Naraku knew exactly what that meant: to drink her blood and become a demon. It possesses immortality, immense power, and a long lifespan. More importantly, if he becomes a demon, he can openly use blood demon magic, and it can even be said that his awakened ability is precisely ribbon manipulation. After all, demons' blood demon arts are incredibly diverse, so it's not too far-fetched for similar abilities to appear. And he subconsciously touched his chest. There, a strange feeling was slowly flowing. It was the immortality attribute brought by the red spider lily. Although it was only 1 point, the feeling of unyielding will in the face of adversity was exceptionally clear, as if unimaginable power would erupt on the edge of life and death. If it becomes a ghost and is combined with the red spider lily. Tsukuyomi Naraku closed her eyes, mentally considering the possibilities. In the original work, Tomioka overcame control, while Nezuko not only overcame control but also sunlight. Tomioka's success stemmed from centuries of research and her hatred for Muzan, while Nezuko's was attributed to her deep sleep and the apparent family's tendency to consume spider lilies like wild vegetables. As for myself, possessing the immortality attribute granted by the spider lily, along with the knowledge and system assistance of modern people, I might indeed be able to find a way to overcome the sunlight in a short period of time. If he succeeds, he will become the first ghost who is not afraid of sunlight. This will be the power that Muzan has always dreamed of, and it will also be his greatest trump card for survival. Of course, the risks are also extremely high. Becoming a ghost means completely leaving the human race. The Demon Slayer Corps will become the enemy, and the pillars of the Demon Slayer Corps will not hesitate to kill him. And the demon's camp is by no means benevolent. The upper moon demons are constantly scheming against each other, and Muzan is particularly capricious, treating his subordinates as pawns to be discarded at any time. Not to mention that becoming a demon means having to eat people. Tsukuyomi Naraku didn't know if she could accept that. But at least on Daki's side, he opened his eyes and the moonlight reflected a cool glow in his pupils. Daki's affection level towards him has reached 50. Although he is still essentially an interesting toy, at least she is willing to protect him, give him the opportunity to tell stories, and even care about his safety. If I become a ghost, perhaps I can truly integrate into her world and truly become one of her fellow beings. At that time, the favorability rating might increase faster, and more abilities might be unlocked. Moreover, with the identity of a ghost, he could stay by her side legitimately without worrying about being eaten one day, as long as it remains useful and interesting. But we can't rush it. Tsukuyomi Naraku stood up, walked to the window, and pushed it open a crack. A cool night breeze blew in, and the distant mountains and forests were dark and gloomy, with the occasional cry of a night bird. He is still human, which is both his greatest disadvantage and his greatest advantage. Its disadvantages lie in its fragility, short lifespan, and inability to protect itself. His advantage lies in the fact that Daki is interested in him, and this interest is largely based on his identity as a human. If she suddenly became a ghost, would she feel like she lost that special quality? After all, to her, ghosts are everywhere, but interesting humans are few and far between. Therefore, the timing of becoming a ghost must be chosen carefully. It's best to wait until the level of affection is higher, until she really starts to care about him as a person, instead of just treating him as a toy for amusement. If I had made reasons like, I want to stay by your side forever, or I want to become stronger so I can help you back, then she might have been more receptive. Before this, the blood demon art must not be revealed. It must be completely hidden as if it had never been possessed. As for the immortality attribute of the spider lily, this is his ultimate trump card and he must never tell anyone, not even Daki. Get back safely first. Tsukuyomi Naraku took a deep breath, closed the window, and lay back down on the tatami mat. The cool touch of the jade pendant at his waist seeped through his clothes. It was the scent of the fallen princess, the bond between him and the most dangerous demon in the world. He closed his eyes, and the image of Doki's exquisitely beautiful face, adorned with eerie patterns, floated into his mind, along with the complex and enigmatic look in her eyes when she pinched his earlobe, and the fleeting concern she showed when they parted this morning. If they don't eat people, he repeated the thoughts from the daytime to himself, a bitter smile involuntarily creeping onto his lips. How could that be? She is Upper Moon 6, a demon who has devoured countless people. She may have saved May out of pity, or perhaps she was interested in him, but none of that could change her fundamental nature of being a cannibal. Even so, Tsukuyomi Naraku could still feel a stirring in her heart that she shouldn't have. Perhaps it was the original owner of this body's aristocratic aesthetic sense at play, or perhaps it was his own modern-day obsession with good looks kicking in, or perhaps. In this hellish world, having grasped at the only seemingly decent lifeline, one can't help but want to rely on it. This is such a hassle. He turned over, his fingers unconsciously tracing the patterns on the jade pendant. Every step from here on out must be taken with extreme caution, concealing the blood demon technique, hiding the secret of the spider lily, maintaining one's persona, increasing favorability, and finding the right opportunity. The ultimate goal is to survive, whether as a human or a ghost. As long as you survive, outside the window night deepened. From the distant mountains and forests, the howls of wild beasts seemed to drift in, or perhaps they weren't wild beasts. Tsukuyomi Naraku gripped the jade pendant tightly and closed her eyes. I'm heading back to Kyoto tomorrow. Return to the side of that beautiful but wicked woman and continue this dangerous and delicate game. The stakes in the game were his life. The tranquility of the night was shattered by a piercing sound. Tsukuyomi Naraku jolted awake from her light sleep, her mind still hazy. She instinctively cursed, damn it, who the hell is up so late at night tearing the house apart? He realized something was wrong as soon as he said it. That sound wasn't from someone tearing the house down, it's the sound of chewing. The sticky, slow chewing sounds, accompanied by the crackling of bones, came from the next room, clear enough to send chills down your spine even through the thin wooden wall. Tsukuyomi Naraku instantly regained consciousness, his back soaked with cold sweat. He lay frozen on the bed, holding his breath, his ears straining to hear any sounds outside. The chewing sounds lasted for about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, then stopped abruptly. A deathly silence. It was so quiet that I could hear my own heart pounding. Tsukuyomi Naraku slowly sat up in bed, her movements so quiet that she made no sound. He reached into his robes and gripped the cold jade pendant tightly. The scent of Daki enveloped his fingertips, bringing a faint sense of security. Then footsteps. It came softly and slowly from the other end of the corridor, approaching his door step by step. It stopped at the doorway. Is anyone there? A soft female voice asked, tinged with panic and helplessness. My companion seems to be sick. Could you please help me? Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart sank. Damn it, they're even doing role-playing. He held his breath, remained motionless, and didn't even dare to blink. The woman outside the door waited a few seconds, and when she heard no response, she knocked gently again. Please, it's really urgent. I'm all alone, it's really. Her voice carried a perfectly timed sob. If it were an ordinary traveler, they probably would have opened the door. But Tsukuyomi Naraku only gripped the jade pendant tighter, while her other hand quietly reached for her pillow. There lay a short sword there, given to him by Daki from May before they set off, saying it was for self-defense. The woman outside the door asked twice more, her tone growing increasingly anxious. Then patience ran out. Bang. The wooden door was slammed open from the outside with tremendous force, sending splinters flying. A figure rushed in, moving so fast it was almost invisible. But Tsukuyomi Naraku saw it clearly. That wasn't a woman at all. That was a man, or rather, he used to be a man. His deathly pale face shone in the moonlight. His features were still fairly regular, but his expression was crazed, his eyes were bloodshot, and a fresh streak of blood hung from the corner of his mouth. His body was hunched over, as if he had suffered from long-term malnutrition, but his bare arms and calves were muscular, and his skin was a sickly grayish-white, covered with bluish-black veins. His chest was splattered with dark red blood, and the strong stench of blood instantly filled the entire room. Ghost. Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart nearly jumped out of her throat. This was the first time he had seen a real ghost at such close range and in such a lucid state. Not the kind of beautiful and dangerous disguise like Daki, but a naked, man-eating monster. Fear poured over him like ice water, but he forced himself to remain calm. Don't panic, absolutely don't panic. His hand was still clasped in his bosom, the patterns on the jade pendant digging into his palm. He slowly withdrew his hand from his bosom and held the jade pendant in front of him. The blood-red jade pendant gleamed dimly in the moonlight, faintly emanating the aura of an upper moon demon. Almost simultaneously, the door to the next room was also kicked open. Mei's figure flashed in like a ghost, holding a slender short knife in her hand, the blade gleaming coldly in the moonlight. She stood in front of Tsukuyomi Naraku, her eyes beneath the mask fixed intently on the demon. "Step back." Mei's voice was icy. "This is Lady Warabi's important subordinate. If you dare to touch him, you will be making an enemy of that lady." The ghost paused, tilted its head, and seemed to be thinking. "Warawarahime." He repeated the name, a look of confusion in his eyes. "Never heard of her." Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart tightened. Damn it. Warabiheim is Daki's stage name, used only in the geisha district. These wild ghosts probably have never even heard of this name. He couldn't say Daki directly either. That was her real name, which she had never told him. Even if revealing it now might scare the demon away, if Daki finds out later, she'll definitely wonder. How could a human she's only recently met know her true name as an upper-rank demon? The Jade Pendant. Could it be that the aura emanating from this Jade Pendant isn't strong enough? Or is it that this demon's senses are too weak to detect the pressure from the upper moon demon? The demon took another step forward, its gaze falling on the Jade Pendant in Tsukuyomi Naraku's hand. He frowned as if carefully sensing something. The madness on his face faded somewhat, replaced by a kind of instinctive fear. "The thing in your hand," he began hoarsely, his voice hesitant. "Who gave it to you?" Tsukuyomi Naraku took a deep breath, forcing her voice to remain steady. "This was given to me by a high-ranking official. I'm here on his orders, so you'd better not delay our journey otherwise. You won't be able to bear the consequences if he blames you." He spoke vaguely, neither mentioning a name nor a specific identity, only emphasizing that person. This kind of vague intimidation is sometimes more effective than directly stating a name. The ghost hesitated as expected. He stared at the jade pendant for a few seconds, then glanced at the plum blossoms blocking his way before finally fixing his gaze on Tsukuyomi Naraku, a gaze filled with greed and struggle. This human has a strange allure. It was that extremely rare aura of flesh and blood, seemingly containing special energy, that held a fatal attraction for him. Although I don't know why, I don't feel that urge to eat this person like I have with any other humans I've seen before. But if I could eat this person, his power would definitely increase significantly, and he might even break through his current bottleneck. He's a ghost with ideals and ambition. He won't refuse to eat just because the food doesn't taste good. But the aura emanating from the jade pendant, though faint, carried a powerful pressure that made his very soul tremble. That was the aura of a superior, an existence that a wild ghost like him could never contend with. To eat or not to eat. His fangs gleamed coldly in the moonlight, his Adam's apple bobbed, and he let out a low, beastly growl. May gripped the hilt of her knife tightly, leaning slightly forward, ready to attack at any moment. She could sense that the ghost wasn't particularly strong, but ghosts in a state of madness are often more dangerous. They will pounce on their prey without hesitation, even if it means mutual destruction. Tsukuyomi Naraku's palms were sweaty. He could feel the ghost's struggle, and he could feel its greed almost overwhelming its fear. If this ghost really lunges at me recklessly, will May be able to stop it? Will the jade pendant's deterrent effect fail? Time seemed to stand still. Every second felt like a year. Finally, the ghost took a step back. "Consider yourself lucky," he said through gritted teeth, his eyes practically brimming with greed, "but next time, if I happen to meet you alone in the wild." He didn't finish speaking, but his meaning was already clear. After saying that, he turned around, his figure flashing out the door like a ghost, disappearing into the darkness of the corridor. The footsteps faded into the distance until they disappeared completely. May remained in a wary posture for another 10 seconds or so before slowly relaxing. She turned around and looked at Tsukuyomi Naraku. "Is the young master all right?" Tsukuyomi Naraku then realized that his whole body was trembling slightly. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "It's all right. Thank you, Miss May." May nodded, walked to the broken door, checked the situation outside, then turned back and said, "This is not a safe place to stay. Although the ghost has retreated, it may still be lingering nearby. We'd better leave now." Now. Tsukuyomi Naraku glanced out the window. The night was deep, and there were still at least 2 hours until dawn. "Yes," May's voice was firm. "Lady Warabi instructed us not to go out at night, but that was for safe accommodations. This place is no longer safe. We must leave immediately and find a more secluded spot to wait for dawn." She paused, then added, "Furthermore, that ghost might gather its companions. While most wild ghosts are solitary, some will share information about their prey. If it spreads your aura, the consequences would be unimaginable." Tsukuyomi Naraku immediately understood. He quickly packed his bags. Actually, there wasn't much to pack. The most important things were all on him. He put the jade pendant back on close to his body. tucked the short knife into his waistband, and stuffed the packet of embroidery thread samples into his bosom. May had already woken the coachman. The silent middle-aged man was clearly startled as well, but he didn't ask anything and simply went to prepare the carriage. 10 minutes later, the carriage drove out of the inn's backyard and sped away along the dirt road. Inside the carriage, Tsukuyomi Naraku leaned against the window, looking out at the dark night through the gap in the bamboo curtain. The near-death experience still left him shaken, but something else was making him even more uneasy. Why is that ghost so interested in his flesh and blood? Don't I possess the breath of equality? Could it be because of the red spider lily? After he ate the flower, his body did indeed undergo some subtle changes. More energy and sharper senses, but other than that, there are no other obvious external changes. Could this change make his flesh and blood have a special attraction for ghosts? If that's the case, then we're in big trouble. This means that he not only has to hide the secret from Daki, but also has to be wary of all the wild spirits who can sense his presence. And, could Daki also sense the special nature of his flesh and blood? The thought sent a chill down his spine. "Miss May," he suddenly spoke, "that ghost just now, have you encountered anything similar before?" May sat opposite him, wiping her dagger. Hearing this, she looked up, her eyes beneath the mask calm and unwavering. "I've encountered them before. Most wild ghosts are indiscriminate predators. They'll pounce on anything that senses a human presence. But the way they hesitated after being intimidated by your aura, as you did just now, that's strange." She paused, seemingly choosing her words carefully. That ghost seems to particularly want the young master. Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart sank again. Maybe it's because I look appetizing. He forced a lighthearted laugh, trying to mask his unease with a joke. May glanced at him, seemingly sniffing him, but didn't respond to the joke. She simply said seriously, "Young master, you do indeed possess a special aura, but it's very faint. Unless you're very close, you probably wouldn't be able to detect it." "Really?" Tsukuyomi Naraku clenched her fists. The effects of the red spider lily were indeed changing his constitution. Although it's very faint now, will it become more and more obvious over time? We must find a way to cover it up as soon as possible. "Does Miss May have any suggestions?" he asked. "For example, what methods could be used to mask this aura?" May thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I don't know, perhaps. We could ask Lady Warabi. She knows far more about these matters than I do." "Ask about Daki?" Tsukuyomi Naraku smiled bitterly. "Wouldn't that be like walking right into a trap?" The carriage sped through the night. The driver clearly knew the road well, maneuvering steadily even without lights. Tsukuyomi Naraku leaned against the carriage wall, closed her eyes, but her mind was a jumbled mess. The deterrent effect of the jade pendant is limited. The scent of flesh and blood might attract ghosts. The secret of the red spider lily must be kept hidden. Blood demon arts cannot be practiced. The plan to turn into a ghost needs careful consideration. Every step was taken with extreme caution. Now all he can rely on is the jade pendant at his waist and the meager interest that beautiful but dangerous demon has in him. The night was as dark as ink, and the carriage sped along the bumpy dirt road, the sound of its wheels rolling over gravel particularly clear in the silent wilderness. Tsukuyomi Naraku leaned against the carriage wall, closing his eyes to rest, but his nerves were on edge. The icy touch of the jade pendant against his chest constantly reminded him of the failed attack he had just attempted. Suddenly, the driver tightened the reins. Whoa. The horses neighed and the carriage shook violently. Tsukuyomi Naraku was nearly thrown off, but May steadied herself immediately, placing her hand on the hilt of her sword. "What happened?" she asked in a low voice. The driver's voice trembled, ahead. In the middle of the road, Tsukuyomi Naraku lifted a corner of the bamboo curtain, her pupils shrinking sharply. Under the moonlight, two figures stood in the middle of the road. The one on the left is tall and thin like a bamboo pole, with limbs twisted at bizarre angles. His skin is a rotten grayish green, and he has only one large eye on his face, which takes up half of his face. The one on the right is short, stout, and bloated, covered in tumor-like protrusions, with a mouth that splits to his ears, revealing a mouthful of fine, sharp teeth. Two ghosts. Moreover, they were clearly coming for this carriage. Yo, the news was right. The one-eyed ghost's voice was hoarse and unpleasant, like sandpaper rubbing against metal. "There is indeed a very peculiar smell." The fleshy monster sniffed, a greedy glint in its single eye. "It smells a little different. It should taste delicious." May had already jumped off the carriage, her short sword drawn, and stood in front of the carriage. Her voice was as cold as ice. "Step back. This man is under the protection of Lady Warabi. If you dare to harm him, you will be making an enemy of that lady." "Willow Princess?" The one-eyed demon tilted his head, seemingly recalling something. "Never heard of her. Which mountain are you from?" The tumor-like demon scoffed, "Little girl, don't try to scare us with adults. This is the middle of nowhere. If we eat it, we don't care. Who'll know it was us?" Mei's breathing became noticeably more rapid. Tsukuyomi Naraku could sense her anger. But what left him even more speechless was, didn't Daki even tell this loyal maid her real name? He lifted the carriage curtain and slowly stepped down. He held the jade pendant in his palm, and the aura of an upper moon demon emanated from it faintly. The two ghosts' gazes immediately focused on him. The one-eyed ghost narrowed its single eye while the fleshy tumored ghost frowned. "That's him?" The one-eyed man's tone was clearly disappointed. "He doesn't look anything special. The meat does look tender, but the taste." "No," the tumor-like creature interrupted him, sniffing carefully. "The smell is definitely unique. I've never smelled anything like it before, but why do I not really feel like eating it?" This contradictory feeling left both ghosts somewhat confused. As demons, their appetite for humans is instinctive, but this human in front of them has thrown their instincts into disarray. They feel that it should taste delicious, yet inexplicably don't really want to eat it. Tsukuyomi Naraku understood. This is likely the result of the combined effect of the breath of equality talent and the aura of the red spider lily. His talent made him appear as non-food to demons, but the special energy of the red spider lily also made his flesh and blood somewhat attractive to demons. The conflicting effects led to this contradictory reaction. The problem is that this contradiction only diminishes appetite but does not eliminate malice. "Never mind." The one-eyed demon shook his twisted arm, a cruel glint in his single eye. "Although I don't really want to eat them, killing them for fun isn't bad. I love hearing the screams of humans before they die." The tumor-like demon grinned, its mouth full of sharp teeth gleaming coldly in the moonlight. "Then, let's have some fun." Mei gripped her knife tightly and whispered to Tsukuyomi Naraku, "Young master, I'll hold them off. You run east, there's a grove of trees there." Before the words were even finished, the one-eyed demon had already moved. Its speed was astonishing. Its twisted body crawled on the ground like a spider, and in the blink of an eye, it rushed in front of Mei, one arm lashing out like a whip. Mei dodged to the side, her short sword flashing coldly as it precisely slashed at the arm. But the one-eyed demon's arm was strangely flexible, actually curving in midair to avoid the blade, while simultaneously flicking out sharp bone spikes from his fingertips, aiming straight for Mei's throat. Clang. The crisp sound of metal clashing. Mei used the blade to deflect the bone spur, but the immense force sent her staggering back 2 steps. At this moment, the tumor demon also moved. It did not attack directly, but instead opened its huge mouth that split to its ears, and a foul-smelling green mist gushed out. Poisonous fog. Mei's expression changed, and she immediately held her breath, pulling Tsukuyomi Naraku backward as quickly as possible. But the fog spread too quickly, instantly covering an area of several feet in the surrounding area. Tsukuyomi Naraku felt a pungent stench assault her brain, her vision went black, and her throat burned with excruciating pain. "Young master, cover your mouth and nose." Mei's voice was already somewhat muffled. Tsukuyomi Naraku covered his mouth and nose with his sleeve, but the poisonous fog was everywhere, and his consciousness began to fade. The two ghosts approached with sinister smiles from within the fog. The poisonous fog had no effect on them, but instead served as excellent cover. Completion. The thought had barely formed when Tsukuyomi Naraku heard another voice. Water-breathing first form, water surface slash. The clear, cool male voice was like an icy spring striking a stone. The next second, a bright blue, arc-shaped blade of light tore through the poisonous mist, cascading down from midair like a waterfall. Where the blade flashed, the poisonous mist was cleaved open, revealing the astonished faces of the two ghosts behind it. The one-eyed demon reacted the fastest, its twisted body retreating rapidly, but the blade was even faster. One of its arms was severed at the shoulder, black blood spurting out. Ah! The one-eyed demon screamed in agony. The owner of that blade of light had already landed. He was a young man who looked to be around 20 years old, wearing the black uniform of the demon's Slayer Corps, with a dark blue hayori over it, embroidered with wave-like patterns. He had short, dark blue hair with slightly curled ends, a handsome face, but his eyes were as cold as knives. What is most eye-catching is the Nichiren blade in his hand. Its blade is a deep blue like water shimmering in the moonlight. The demon's Slayer Corps. The fleshy demon's voice was tinged with fear. Without a word, the young man vanished again. No, not vanished, but moved too fast. Tsukuyomi Naraku only saw a series of afterimages, and with each afterimage, streaks of azure light flashed. Water-breathing type II water wheel. The youth spun in the air, the blade flashing like a wheel, enveloping both ghosts simultaneously. The one-eyed demon managed to block with its remaining arm, but the blade easily severed its bone spikes, leaving a deep wound in its chest. The fleshy demon tried to use its fleshy growths to defend itself, but those seemingly tough growths were as fragile as paper in the face of the blade, instantly sliced open, and black blood gushed out like a fountain. Damn it. A mad glint flashed in the one-eyed demon's eye. Attacked together, the two demons pounced on the youth at the same time. The one-eyed demon opened its mouth wide and spewed out a stream of black acid. The tumor demon swelled its body and its tumors shot out like cannonballs. But the young man's expression remained unchanged. He took a deep breath, and the blue light on his Nicaran blade suddenly surged. Water-breathing fourth form, strike tide. The flashes of sword light surged forth in layers like a tidal wave, not just one, not just two, but dozens, even hundreds. Each blade of light precisely slashed at the acid and the tumor, shattering and vaporizing them in midair. The tide of sword light continued unabated, instantly engulfing the two ghosts completely. No, the screams stopped abruptly. When the flash of the blade faded, only two disintegrating bodies remained on the spot. The one-eyed demon and the fleshy demon still had expressions of disbelief on their faces before turning into black ash and disappearing in the wind. The moonlight shone down again, illuminating the young man's figure as he sheathed his sword. He turned around and looked at Tsukuyomi Naraku and Mei. His gaze lingered for a moment on the short sword in Mei's hand, then fell on Tsukuyomi Naraku, or more precisely, on the jade pendant he clutched tightly in his hand. "Are you all right?" The young man's voice was softer than before, but it still carried a sense of distance. Mei watched him warily, not letting her guard down. Tsukuyomi Naraku took a deep breath. The poisonous fog had dissipated, but her throat still burned. He coughed twice before managing to speak. "Thank you so much for saving me." Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly froze. Short, dark blue hair, the aura of water, a handsome face, wavy patterns on his hayori. This image, this breathing technique, could it be? Dimensional gate hint, target information detection, name, Giyu Tomioka, tentative, identity, water pillar of the Demon Slayer Corps. Status, on a mission, slightly fatigued affection level, 4100 developed interest in special humans. Note, due to the host's breadth of equality talent and personal traits, the initial favorability is relatively high. Reaching a favorability rating of 50 unlocks the basic water-breathing training method, 70 unlocks guided training, and 90 unlocks special story side quest. Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart began to pound wildly. Water pillar, Giyu Tomioka. No, wait, the system displays Giyu Tomioka tentative, perhaps to avoid direct spoilers. But without a doubt, he is a pillar, one of the strongest fighters in the Demon Slayer Corps. And a mere 40% favorability rating, just because I saved them once. No, that's not right. The system mentioned the breadth of equality, talent, and personal traits, probably just extra bonuses from his Naraku-like face and transmigrator aura. More importantly, once your affinity reaches 50, you can obtain the water-breathing technique. The temptation is too great. Breathing techniques are the core power of the Demon Slayer Corps in fighting demons, and the fundamental way for humans to contend with demons. If he masters breathing techniques, even just the basics, his survival ability will be greatly enhanced. Moreover, breathing techniques are purely human skills and wouldn't be detected by Daki like blood demon arts. But Tsukuyomi Naraku glanced at the jade pendant in her hand, then at Tomioka Giyu in front of her. If he chooses the breathing technique, it means he must align himself with the Demon Slayer Corps, or at least maintain some connection with them. This is something Daki absolutely cannot tolerate. She is an upper moon demon, and the Demon Slayer Corps is her and all demons' mortal enemy. Once his connection with the Demon Slayer Corps is discovered, his fate is predictable. And can he really learn it? If it's just about building up his favorability, how long will that take? They're not naive beauties. I am Tsukuyomi Naraku, and this is Mei. Suppressing her thoughts, Tsukuyomi Naraku bowed respectfully. "Thank you for saving my life. May I ask your honorable name?" "Tomioka," the young man answered succinctly, his gaze still lingering on him. "Why are you here so late at night? This area is often haunted. It's dangerous." "We." Tsukuyomi Naraku's mind raced. "We're members of a caravan. We were originally staying at an inn, but we were attacked by demons and had to travel through the night. Unexpectedly, we encountered these two." He gave a half-serious, half-joking explanation while observing Yoshiyuki Tomioka's reaction. The water jet's expression was indifferent, revealing neither belief nor disbelief, but at least it showed no hostility. "A caravan?" Tomioka Giyu glanced at the carriage, then at the sword in Mei's hand. Would caravan guards use this type of sword? Mei's body was visibly tense. Tsukuyomi Naraku smiled, a smile tinged with just the right amount of helplessness. "To be honest, we are not an ordinary merchant caravan. My young lady has a special status. This trip is for a private matter, and I cannot elaborate further." He deliberately spoke vaguely, explaining why he had combat capabilities while avoiding revealing Daki's existence. The phrase, a young lady with a special status, fits the description of a noblewoman or daughter of a wealthy merchant and would not arouse much suspicion. Yoshiyuki Tomioka was silent for a moment, then nodded. In that case, I won't ask any more questions. But you'd better leave this area as soon as possible. According to intelligence, there are at least 3 ghosts active in this area. The 2 you just saw were only 2 of them. 3. Tsukuyomi Naraku's expression changed slightly. There's one more. Before the words were finished, a piercing scream suddenly came from afar. The sound was sharp and piercing, like a fingernail scraping against glass, instantly shattering the tranquility of the night sky. Immediately afterwards, a dark figure darted out of the woods and rushed towards them at an astonishing speed. It was a monster completely different from the 2 ghosts from before. It has a female silhouette, but its entire body is covered in black feathers, its arms are huge wings, and its legs are sharp bird claws. Its face had no features, only a huge mouth full of serrated teeth which was now wide open, emitting a piercing shriek. The third one, Giyu Tomioka's eyes sharpened, and he drew his Nichiren blade once more, but the bird-shaped ghost wasn't targeting him. It lunged straight at Tsukuyomi Naraku. Young master, be careful. Mei tried to stop her, but the bird-shaped ghost was too fast. With a flap of its wings, it stirred up a gale, causing her to stagger backward. Tsukuyomi Naraku tried to dodge, but his body seemed to be nailed to the spot. The shriek contained some kind of mental attack, causing his consciousness to become chaotic, just as the massive, serrated jaws were about to snap down. The azure light of the blade flashed once more. Water-breathing third form, flowing dance. Giyu Tomioka's figure transformed into a flowing stream of water, cutting between the bird demon and Naraku Tsukuyomi with incredible speed. The Nichiren blade traced several intersecting arcs in the air, each strike precisely hitting the bird demon's joints. Black feathers and blood splattered. The bird-shaped demon let out a painful shriek and tried to flap its wings, but Giyu Tomioka's movements were fluid and graceful, the blade flashing like flowing water as it wrapped around the demon, each strike taking away a part of its limb. 3 seconds. In just 3 seconds, the seemingly ferocious bird-shaped demon was cleaved into several pieces and vanished into black ash. Giyu Tomioka sheathed his sword, his breathing as steady as ever, as if the fierce battle just now was merely a warm-up. He looked at Tsukuyomi Naraku, a scrutinizing glint in his eyes. You are very attractive to demons. It's not a question, it's a statement. Tsukuyomi Naraku gave a wry smile. I don't know why either. Special constitution. Giyu Tomioka interrupted him. While rare, it's not unheard of. There are similar records within the Demon Slayer Corps. Some people's flesh and blood have a special attraction to demons or contain special powers. He paused, then continued. If you'd like, you can come back to the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters with me. It's a safer environment there, and there are doctors who specialize in treating this type of constitution. Dimensional Gate hint, Giyu Tomioka's affection +5, current affection 45. Trigger choice, accept invitation / decline invitation. Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart pounded wildly. The Demon Slayer Corps headquarters. There you'll find the complete lineage of breathing techniques, the knowledge to fight demons, and a relatively safe environment. It's much safer than staying by Daki's side as a toy, but... He glanced at Mei. The maid was staring intently at him, her eyes behind the mask revealing a complex and unfathomable expression. If he agrees to go with the Demon Slayer Corps now, what will Mei do? Will she immediately turn against him? Or will she go back to report to Daki? Can he really learn the breathing techniques quickly? What if a demon dies while they're building up his relationship with him? Moreover, once he joined the Demon Slayer Corps, he completely stood on the opposite side of demons. Daki will definitely not let him go, and Muzan may also take notice of this human with special constitution. At that time, he will face the pursuit of the entire ghost faction. More importantly, he has already eaten the spider lily, possessed the attribute of immortality, and is already planning for the possibility of becoming a demon. If they join the Demon Slayer Corps, how long can these secrets remain hidden? Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Tomioka. Tsukuyomi Naraku finally took a deep breath and made her decision. However, I have important matters to attend to and must return to Kyoto as soon as possible. Miss is still waiting for us. He politely declined, but not a complete rejection. However, he changed the subject, his expression turning sincere. If there's an opportunity in the future, I truly hope to learn some methods of self-protection from Mr. Tomioka. After all, this experience has made me realize that without power, even survival in this world is difficult. Yoshiyuki Tomioka looked at him and remained silent for a long time. Then, he took out a small wooden plaque from his pocket and handed it to Tsukuyomi Naraku. This is my contact token. If you change your mind or need help, you can take this to any place with a wisteria crest, and they will contact me. Tsukuyomi Naraku took the wooden plaque. It was an ordinary wooden plaque with the character water engraved on the front and a simple wave pattern on the back, but when held in his hand, he could feel the unique aura of breathing techniques contained within it. Thank you. He solemnly put away the wooden plaque. Yoshiyuki Tomioka nodded, said nothing more, and turned to leave. Mr. Tomioka, Tsukuyomi Naraku suddenly called out to him, was that the breathing technique you were using just now? Giyu Tomioka stopped and glanced back at him. Yes, impressive. Tsukuyomi Naraku exclaimed sincerely, humans can actually wield such power. Breathing techniques were created hundreds of years ago by the original swordsmen. They are skills honed by mortals to fight demons. Giyu Tomioka's voice was calm. It's not magical, it's simply a method to maximize human potential. Anyone can learn it, as long as they have enough perseverance and awareness. After he finished speaking, his figure flickered and disappeared into the night. Tsukuyomi Naraku stood there, clutching the wooden plaque in her hand, speechless for a long time. Young master, Mei's voice came from behind. It's time to go, dawn is approaching. Tsukuyomi Naraku snapped out of her daze and glanced eastward. The sky was already turning a pale white. He glanced one last time in the direction where Yoshiyuki Tomioka had disappeared, then turned and got into the carriage. Inside the carriage, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. The system's prompts remained clear in my mind. Giyu Tomioka's affection level, 45-100. 5 more points of affinity are needed to unlock the basic water-breathing technique. 25 more points of affinity are needed to unlock guided training. 45 more points of affinity are needed to unlock the special story side quest. And another hint. Host detected to have established contact with both the Oni faction Daki and the human faction, Giyu Tomioka, simultaneously, triggering hidden achievement, double life. Achievement description: surviving in the cracks, dancing on the edge of a knife, maintaining a relationship between the two parties without being discovered by either side will earn a special reward. The moon sings a bitter smile in the abyss, a double life. This is F******G like walking a tightrope. On one side are the beautiful and dangerous upper moon demons, and on the other are the powerful and righteous demon slayer core pillars. He, a useless guy with a combat power of only 0. 5 has to navigate between the two while also hiding his secret. The red spider lily, blood demon arts, and that damn special constitution. But he gripped the wooden plaque given to him by Giyu Tomioka and then touched the jade pendant at his waist. He wanted the breathing technique. He also wanted the power of the demon. He must protect the secret of the red spider lily. He had to survive. Greedy, he muttered to himself, a complex smile playing on his lips. Perhaps, but in this cannibalistic world, how can one survive without a little greed? The carriage continued its journey, heading towards Kyoto. There Daki awaits him. There are unfinished stories to tell and dangerous games to continue. But this time, Tsukuyomi Naraku's state of mind was different. He saw another way, although it's dangerous and difficult. Maybe it really will work. Outside the window it was dawn. The sun was high in the sky and the carriage slowly entered Kyoto's geisha district. Tsukuyomi Naraku lifted a corner of the bamboo curtain, gazing at the familiar scenery outside the window. Eaves adorned with hanging red lanterns, alleyways filled with the scent of cosmetics, and the figures of women loitering languidly in the afternoon sun. This is Shimabara, a famous geisha district in Kyoto, and Daki was staying at Kyogokuya, the most luxurious brothel within it. The carriage stopped in the backyard. Mei alighted first, giving a slight nod to Tsukuyomi Naraku. Young master, please rest first. I need to report back to Lady Warabi later. Thank you for your trouble. Tsukuyomi Naraku nodded, watching Mei's figure disappear into the depths of the corridor. He carried the package of embroidery thread samples and walked down the familiar corridor. The Kyogokuya was much quieter during the day than at night, with most of the courtesans and guests still resting, and only a few maids moving quietly along the veranda. When Tsukuyomi Naraku reached the corridor where Daki's room was located, he paused. It's daytime now, Daki should be in her dark room. Logically, he should have waited until evening to pay his respects, but after thinking for a moment, he walked to the familiar paper door and gently knocked. Come in. Daki's voice came from inside the door, less seductive than usual and more languid. Clearly she had just woken up. Tsukuyomi Naraku pushed open the door and entered. The room remained completely shrouded in heavy curtains, with a whale oil lamp in the corner casting a warm yellow light. Daki was sitting in front of her dressing table, her long black hair cascading down her shoulders like a waterfall. She was wearing only a thin cherry-colored nightgown, the neckline of which had slipped loosely to her shoulders, revealing a large expanse of fair skin and delicate collarbones. She held a jade comb in her hand and was slowly and methodically combing her long hair. Hearing the door open, she turned her head. The moment he saw Tsukuyomi Naraku, his dark red pupils suddenly lit up. "You're back." There was a hint of relief in her voice, but it quickly returned to her usual languid tone. "How was the journey?" Tsukuyomi Naraku closed the door and bowed respectfully. "Thanks to you, young lady, I escaped unharmed." A close call. The princess raised an eyebrow, put down the jade comb, and turned to face him. "Tell me about it." Tsukuyomi Naraku carefully chose her words, recounting her encounters on the road in a way that was half true and half false. The story omits Giyu Tomioka's name and the wooden plaque he gave him, only stating that he was attacked by a demon at the inn, fled overnight, and was then attacked by 2 more demons on the road. He was eventually rescued by a passerby. He spoke calmly, but Daki's face gradually darkened as she spoke. When she heard that ghost broke down the door, the jade comb in her hand snapped in two with a crack. "Those who dare touch my people." She repeated in a low voice, a chilling, killing intent in her tone. "Those blind fools, they really have a death wish." She stood up, stepped barefoot onto the tatami mat, and walked step by step to Tsukuyomi Naraku. As he got closer, Tsukuyomi Naraku could clearly see the surging anger in her eyes. That wasn't a disguise, it was the real brutality of an upper moon demon. "Are you hurt?" she asked, and before Tsukuyomi Naraku could answer, she had already reached out and begun to search and check his body. Those hands were cold and soft, pressing and groping against his shoulders, arms, and chest through his clothes. Tsukuyomi Naraku's body stiffened slightly, not because of pain or discomfort, but because too close. At this moment, Daki was only wearing a thin nightgown with the neckline wide open, and from his angle, the curves of her body could be clearly seen beneath the hem. The cool fragrance emanating from her, mixed with the warmth of just waking up, seeped into his nostrils. Her delicate, white hands roamed over his body, her fingertips occasionally brushing against his sensitive spots, sending waves of indescribable tingling sensations through him. Tsukuyomi Naraku felt her mouth was dry and her Adam's apple bobbed involuntarily. He forced himself to look away, but his gaze involuntarily fell on Daki's face. That exquisitely beautiful face was now only a foot away from him. The crimson markings on her left cheek were alluring and captivating under the warm yellow light. His reflection was mirrored in her dark red pupils, which besides anger seemed to conceal something else. She shouldn't be injured. He spoke with some difficulty, his voice a little hoarse. Miss May arrived in time and then she managed to escape. Daki, however, did not stop her inspection. Her hand slid from her chest to her waist, then moved downwards. Naraku Tsukuyomi almost jumped up, but she only checked a dark red spot on the outside of his thigh. There was indeed an abrasion there which he had accidentally gotten while running away. "Here." Her fingertips gently pressed on the abrasion and Tsukuyomi Naraku gasped, not from pain, but from the icy touch combined with her focused expression which made his whole body tense. "It's just a minor injury, nothing serious," he tried to explain. Suddenly, Daki leaned closer, her nose almost touching his neck, and gently sniffed. This action froze Tsukuyomi Naraku completely. "Huh?" Daki looked up, a hint of confusion in her eyes. "Why do you smell better?" Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart tightened. "The red spider lily. Could it be that the red spider lily has truly altered my constitution, even my aura?" He forced a smile and said, "Perhaps it's because it's been so long since we last met, young lady. Have you missed me?" These words were half a test and half a joke, but Daki's reaction was beyond his expectations. She was taken aback at first, then turned her face away, a faint blush rising at the tips of her ears. "Don't flatter yourself, I just feel that your scent is a little different," but her tone softened noticeably, and she stopped what she was doing, though her fingertips were still unconsciously resting on his waist. After a few seconds of silence, she muttered softly, "Maybe it's because I haven't smelled it in so long. After all, you've been gone for several days." These words were spoken softly, but Tsukuyomi Naraku heard them clearly. He looked at her profile as she turned away, and her exquisite face unusually did not display its usual coquettishness or mockery, but rather a certain, almost awkward expression. It's like caring but refusing to admit it, being concerned but trying to hide it. Dimensional gate hint, Daki's affection +5, current affection 55, unlocked status. Proof of longing, Daki's current state of mind. I've actually been regretting letting him out lately. I was afraid something might happen or he might just run away. Luckily, it was just a minor injury, but it's definitely safer to keep him by my side, and his scent, it really does smell better now. Tsukuyomi Naraku was stunned. His favorability rating reached 55, breaking the 50 mark, But that wasn't what he was concerned about at the moment. What he cared about was that sentence in the system notification, "I've actually been regretting letting him out for a while now." And then there's Daki's awkward expression, the faint blush on the tips of her ears and her earlier slip of the tongue. "It's been so long since I smelled it." This upper moon demon who feeds on humans, this beautiful and dangerous evil spirit, is actually worried about him. This realization stirred a strange warmth within Tsukuyomi Naraku. In this world full of ghosts and monsters, and in this precarious situation where he must constantly disguise himself and walk on thin ice, there is actually someone who worries about his safety. Even if the other party is a ghost, even if this worry might just stem from a possessive desire for a toy, but at least she genuinely cared whether he came back alive. "Young lady." He began softly, his voice carrying a gentleness he himself was unaware of. "I have returned safely, and I will continue the story I promised you." Daki then turned her head, gave him a complicated look, and then let out a soft humph. "You're smart enough to know what's good for you." She withdrew her hand, turned around, walked back to the dressing table, sat down, and picked up another comb to comb her long hair. "Now that you're back, get some rest. Tonight, come and tell me a story." "Yes," Tsukuyomi Naraku bowed. "Also," Daki paused, without turning around, "change your clothes. Those dirty ones are an eyesore. I've had new ones prepared for you. They're already in your room." "Thank you, young lady." Tsukuyomi Naraku left the room and gently closed the door. Standing in the corridor, he looked down at his waist. The cool touch of her fingertips still lingered there, as did the subtle sensation of her breath brushing against his neck when she leaned in. He raised his hand and touched his neck, where the lingering scent of her fragrance seemed to still linger. Daki's affection level, 55-100 current status, proof of longing unlocked skill, blood demon ribbon manipulation beginner, can manipulate up to 3 ribbons for simple attacks defense binding, consumes stamina, 12-hour cooldown. Warning, this skill is derived from the same source as Daki's. Please use it with caution to avoid being detected. Tsukuyomi Naraku took a deep breath, suppressing these chaotic thoughts. What is he thinking? Daki is a demon, the 6th upper moon demon, a vengeful spirit who has devoured countless people. Her concern for him was essentially no different from a human's concern for their pet. "I don't want my pet to die. I don't want my pet to run away because pets bring me joy. That's all." He cannot let his guard down because of these small acts of kindness, nor can he develop inappropriate feelings because of them. But he glanced back at the tightly closed paper door, and the faint blush on the tip of Doki's ear as she turned her face away, and the awkward expression on her face when she muttered, "It's been too long since I smelled it," flashed through his mind. This is really troublesome, he muttered to himself, then turned and walked towards his room. The jade pendant at her waist remained cold. The wooden plaque given to him by Giyu Tomioka lay quietly in his arms. In his pocket, the packet of genuine embroidery thread samples, along with a few secretly hidden spider lily petals, emitted a faint warmth that only he could perceive. The road ahead remains dangerous and difficult, but at least now he has more leverage and also more complicated feelings. Pushing open the door to my room, I saw a brand new kimono neatly folded on the tatami mat. The fabric is a deep purple base, embroidered with dark gold flowing cloud patterns. It is made of the finest silk, which feels warm and smooth to the touch. Tsukuyomi Naraku changed her clothes and stood in front of the bronze mirror. The young man in the mirror had jet black hair, dark red pupils, and an almost otherworldly beauty. The new clothes fit him perfectly, accentuating his tall and slender figure and giving him a gentle yet alluring air. He looked at himself in the mirror and suddenly remembered what Daki had just said. "Why do you smell better?" He raised his hand, brought it to his nose, and sniffed. He couldn't smell anything. But if Daki can smell it, other demons might be able to smell it too. The changes in the red spider lily have already begun to appear. Tonight, he's going to tell Daki a story. To tell a compelling story, maintain a persona, and increase lickability. You also need to be careful to hide all your secrets. Tsukuyomi Naraku looked in the mirror and slowly smiled. His smile was gentle, but his eyes were as deep as the night. The game continues, and he was ready. After Naraku left, the room returned to silence. Doki remained seated before her dressing table, absent-mindedly combing her long hair with a jade comb in her hand, her dark red pupils fixed on her reflection in the mirror, her gaze somewhat vacant. Her fingertips unconsciously traced the comb she had just snapped in her hand. The broken edge still bore traces of the force she had released when she lost control. That human has returned safely. This realization finally dispelled the anxiety that had been lingering in her heart for the past few days, but it was replaced by a more subtle emotion that she herself couldn't quite explain. When I examined his body just now, the temperature I felt with my fingertips, the scent I smelled on the side of his neck, and the slightly hoarse voice he spoke. Tusk. She gave a soft hum, shaking off these nonsensical thoughts. It's just a fun toy. Once he finishes telling the story and gets tired of it, he can just eat it. But do we really have to eat it? The moment this question popped into her head, she was taken aback. When did she start hesitating about whether or not to eat a human? Just then, a soft knock sounded on the door. Come in. May pushed open the door and entered, still wearing that dark blue maid's uniform, half of her silver mask gleaming coldly under the whale oil lamp. She bowed deeply, her posture impeccably respectful. Warabeheim no Atoko. Daki didn't turn around, her gaze remained fixed on her reflection in the mirror. Tell me everything that happened on the road. Yes. May's voice was calm, and even as she began her detailed report. From the moment the protagonist sets off for Tsukuyomi village, how they gather red grass to make embroidery thread, how they encounter a demon attack at the inn, how they flee through the night, and how they are besieged by 2 more demons on the way. Upon hearing that the protagonist was alone in her inn room, facing the demon that had broken in, Daki's hand holding the comb tightened slightly. Even though she already knew that Tsukuyomi Naraku had returned safely, and even though she had personally examined him and found that he only had a small scratch, she still couldn't help but frown when she heard this detail. I can almost picture the scene. In the dead of night, outside the thin wooden door lurks a man-eating demon, while he sits alone in the darkness, clutching his jade pendant, awaiting his unknown fate. Madness. Despite being so weak, she still had to pretend to be calm. But it was precisely this foolishness that she found amusing. May continued her report, recounting how the protagonist calmly responded to the second attack, how he attempted to intimidate the evil spirits with the jade pendant and his words, and how he barely managed to survive in the poisonous fog. Daki's brows furrowed even more deeply. Then May mentioned the Demon Slayer Corps. Just then, a member of the Demon Slayer Corps appeared and killed the 2 demons. Daki's eyes suddenly turned cold. The Demon Slayer Corps, her voice was icy. Which one? The pillars. Judging from his breathing technique and strength, he should be a pillar-level cultivator, May replied truthfully. He uses water breathing, his sword is azure, his hayori has wavy patterns, he's about 20 years old with dark blue medium-length hair and a handsome face. Breathing of water, pillar. Information about several water pillars of the Demon Slayer Corps flashed through Daki's mind. This description likely refers to the current water pillar. What did he say after he saved Tsukuyomi Naraku? Daki's tone was calm, but May could sense the danger surging beneath that calm. He inquired about the young master's identity and why he was there so late at night, to which the young master brushed it off with the excuse that a caravan member had been attacked by a demon. Then May paused. The pillar said that the young master had a special constitution that attracted demons, and invited him to the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters, saying it was safer there and that there were doctors who specialized in studying this type of constitution. The temperature in the room seemed to drop to freezing point instantly. Daki slowly turned around, her dark red pupils gleaming eerily in the warm yellow light. She didn't speak but just quietly looked at May, but the oppressive feeling in her gaze made even the most loyal May subconsciously tense up. And then, Daki asked, her voice as light as a feather yet sharp as a blade, "What did Tsukuyomi Naraku answer?" May lowered her head. Young master refused. He said he had important matters to attend to and needed to return to the capital as soon as possible because Miss is still waiting for him. Silence, a long silence. The flame of the whale oil lamp flickered slightly, casting swaying shadows on the wall. Daki sat there, her face expressionless, but May could feel the cold, oppressive aura slowly dissipating. Then she saw the corners of Daki's mouth little by little lift up. It wasn't the usual flirtatious or mocking smile, nor was it a feigned giggle, rather it was a smile that was very light, very faint, yet so real that it sent a shiver down your spine. Is that so? Daki said softly, her tone carrying an indescribable gentleness. That's what he said. Yes, May replied respectfully. All right, you may leave. Daki waved her hand. Don't mention today's events to anyone. Yes, sir. May bowed and withdrew, gently closing the door behind her. Silence returned to the room. Daki sat in front of her dressing table, looking at the lingering smile on her lips in the mirror, her eyes somewhat blank. The young lady is still waiting for him. This idiot. He had the chance to go to a safer place, the chance to learn breathing techniques to gain the power to protect himself, and he refused for this reason. Madness. But for some reason, that inexplicable irritation in her heart completely dissipated, replaced by a warm, somewhat unfamiliar feeling. Just then, the shadow in the corner of the room suddenly began to move. A hunched figure slowly emerged from the shadows, a man who was emaciated yet tall, with shoulders that reached above Daki's head. His skin was a sickly grayish-green, covered with ugly scars and suture-like lines. He wore tattered dark clothes, his hair was disheveled and unkempt, and he wore a half-mask on his face, revealing a distorted and ugly half of his face with the corners of his mouth always drooping down, giving him a gloomy and painful appearance. But his eyes, those dark red eyes just like Daki's, were quietly watching Daki, his gaze filled with the unique concern of an older brother and a hint of worry. "Brother," Daki was taken aback. "Why did you come out?" Jutaro, the other half of Upper Moon 6, Daki's older brother, slowly walked to her side. His movements were somewhat stiff, and his steps were unsteady, as if he had been enduring some kind of pain for a long time. But when he stood still, the aura emanating from him that belonged to an Upper Moon demon was far stronger than that of Daki. "Sister," his voice was hoarse and unpleasant like sandpaper scraping, "you've been very concerned about that human lately." "It's not a question, it's a statement." Daki's body stiffened slightly, then she turned her face away. "I just find him rather interesting. Brother, you saw it yourself, he can make up stories, he can play games, and he talks." "Interesting." Jutaro interrupted her, his dark red eyes fixed on her profile. "Sister, I know you. In all these years, I've never seen you look like that. When you smiled just now, it was genuine." Daki opened her mouth wanting to say something but found herself unable to refute. "Yes. That smile just now was genuine. It wasn't because of any pretense nor because of any attempt to seduce, it was simply because of the warmth that welled up inside me when I heard that human refused the Demon Slayer Corps invitation, saying, 'The lady is still waiting for him.' This unfamiliar feeling made her somewhat flustered." Jutaro, seeing the rare look of helplessness on her face, remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, his voice gentler than before. "Sister, if you really care about him that much, why not turn him into a demon?" Daki suddenly turned her head. "That way he can stay by your side forever," Jutaro continued, a strained smile appearing on his ugly face, a twisted and grotesque smile, but the tenderness in his eyes was genuine. "I want to see you happier. These past years, you've rarely been truly happy. Turn into a ghost. Stay by my side forever." Daki stared blankly at her brother, the image of Tsukuyomi Naraku's beautiful face flashing through her mind. She recalled his focused expression when telling stories, his sly smile when playing games, and the slightly reddened tips of his ears and somewhat embarrassed look in his eyes when she examined him earlier. If he became a demon, he wouldn't have to worry about being attacked by other demons anymore, wouldn't have to be afraid of the Demon Slayer Corps, and could always stay by her side, telling her stories and playing games with her. But to become a ghost means to drink her blood, to abandon one's human identity and to eat humans. Would that gentle human who would be moved by a word of concern from her and feel embarrassed by being touched by her truly want to become a ghost? Moreover, once he becomes a demon, he will no longer be the Tsukuyomi Naraku he is now. Ghosts inherit the obsessions and memories of their previous life, but their personality and emotions may undergo drastic changes. Will he still be that interesting person then? Will he still look at her with that gentle gaze? Daki didn't know. She lowered her eyes, her long eyelashes casting soft shadows on her face. Unconsciously, her fingertips traced the broken jade comb, her thoughts a jumbled mess. Jutaro didn't urge her but simply watched her quietly. After a long while he said softly, "Think it over carefully. Whatever decision you make, your brother will support you." After he finished speaking, his figure slowly blended into the shadows and disappeared. Only Daki remained in the room. She looked up at herself in the mirror. On her stunningly beautiful face, the crimson pattern on her left cheek was as alluring as blood, while her dark red pupils were filled with confusion. "Will I become a ghost?" She repeated those three words softly, but what came to mind was the human light that shone in Tsukuyomi Naraku's dark red eyes when he smiled at her. She had never seen that kind of light in the eyes of a ghost, and she was actually somewhat reluctant to let it disappear. As night completely enveloped Kyoto, Tsukuyomi Naraku changed into the deep purple kimono prepared by Daki and carefully adjusted her clothes in front of the bronze mirror. The young man in the mirror had jet black hair, and his dark red pupils shimmered with a warm glow in the candlelight. His handsome face, paired with his magnificent attire, certainly gave him the air of a noble young master. But at that moment, his mind was not on his appearance. I repeatedly rehearsed the story I was about to tell in my mind. That's a sequel to The Embroiderer's Revenge. He deliberately designed several plot twists and foreshadowing which should keep the fallen princess entertained. His fingers unconsciously caressed the jade pendant at his waist, but the image of Dujai examining his wounds during the day kept flashing through his mind. Those icy hands, that cool fragrance, and the faint blush on the tip of her ear when she turned her face away. Tusk, Tsukuyomi Naraku shook her head, suppressing these distracting thoughts. He picked up the prepared package of embroidery thread, which was indeed red grass dye thread, a specialty of Yoyang village with a color as bright as blood, which served as proof of the purpose of his trip. Composing himself, he pushed open the door and walked along the corridor towards Daki's room. Warm yellow light shone from inside the paper door. Tsukuyomi Naraku raised her hand and gently knocked 3 times. "Come in." Daki's voice was less languid than usual and more filled with an indescribable emotion. He pushed open the door and entered. The scene inside the room startled him slightly. Tonight, Daki did not sit at the low table but leaned against the soft couch by the window. Although the windows were still completely sealed off by curtains, she changed into a smoky-colored kimono, the front of which was loosely tied, revealing her delicate collarbone and a small patch of fair shoulder. Her black hair wasn't styled up as usual, but rather casually draped down her back, with a few strands falling beside her cheeks, making her stunning face even more alluring. She held a round fan in her hand, waving it lightly and casually, her gaze fixed on a certain point in the void, as if deep in thought. Hearing the door open, she turned around, her dark red pupils reflecting the figure of Tsukuyomi Naraku in the candlelight. "You're here?" She asked casually. Yes, Tsukuyomi Naraku bowed and sat down opposite her. "I have thought of the continuation of the story and have come to report it to you, young lady." Daki hummed in agreement, her fan stilling. Her gaze fell on him, and noticing he was now dressed in new clothes, her eyes flickered slightly. "Speak," she said. Tsukuyomi Naraku composed herself and began to narrate. He recounted how, after the embroiderer left that cannibalistic mansion, she encountered a reclusive old embroiderer in the mountains. The old embroiderer taught her a lost technique called blood-dyed embroidery, using special herbs mixed with her own blood to dye the thread. The resulting patterns could carry emotions and memories, and even influence the mind of the person who saw the embroidery. The embroiderer spent 3 years learning the technique, during which time she used it to help the villagers at the foot of the mountain solve many problems. Someone was being bullied by a thug, so she embroidered a picture of being possessed by an evil spirit and hung it at the thug's door. That night, the thug had nightmares and never dared to do evil again. A woman, abandoned by a heartless man, embroidered a picture of a heartless man's repentance, and the heartless man actually changed his mind. But the embroiderer always remembered her original intention. She wanted revenge not only for herself, but also for all those who were bullied like her. So she secretly contacted women who had been wronged in various places and formed an organization called Red Thread. They used embroidery to convey messages, used embroidery techniques to punish evildoers, and wove a nationwide network of intelligence and revenge with each silk thread. But this good fortune didn't last long. Tsukuyomi Naraku paused deliberately, observing Daki's reaction. Daki's fan had completely stopped, her dark red pupils fixed intently on him, clearly captivated by the story. The government took notice of the red line, and an official named Yan Taixin was ordered to investigate. He was incorruptible and ruthless and quickly uncovered the embroiderer's true identity. Tsukuyomi Naraku lowered her voice, creating a tense atmosphere. He led government troops to besiege the embroidery workshop where the embroiderer worked. In that battle, the embroiderer's men suffered heavy losses, and she herself was shot in the shoulder by Yan Taixin's arrow, nearly losing her life. Daki's brows furrowed slightly. The embroiderer led her remaining sisters into the deep mountains, pursued relentlessly by Yan Taixin. In the most perilous moment, the embroiderer suddenly remembered the old embroiderer's dying words. The highest level of blood-stained embroidery is not about staining the thread with blood, but about using the body as the thread and the soul as the needle. At this point, Tsukuyomi Naraku's tone became solemn. The embroiderer decided to take the risk. She told her sisters to hide and face the pursuers alone. When Yan Taixin and his soldiers surrounded her, she didn't resist. Instead, she sat cross-legged, took out her embroidery needle and began to embroider on her own body. "Embroider it on yourself?" Daki finally couldn't help but ask, her voice filled with surprise. "Yes," Tsukuyomi Naraku nodded. She embroidered resentment on her arms, unwillingness on her chest, and obsession on her back. Every stitch was stained with blood, and every thread carried all the emotions she had experienced over the years. As the last needle was inserted, her body suddenly emitted a blinding red light. He deliberately stopped there, watching Daki. And then, Daki leaned forward, her voice tinged with urgency. Tsukuyomi Naraku smiled and continued. In the red light, the embroiderer's figure disappeared, replaced by a huge embroidery floating in midair, embroidered with the faces of Yan Taixin and his soldiers. Each face bound by red threads, each thread connected to the resentment of those who had been bullied, whom the embroiderer had previously embroidered. The moment Yan Teixin saw the embroidery, he froze on the spot. His eyes widened and he let out a scream that was not human. He saw it. He saw the ghosts of those he or his colleagues had killed. He saw their dying pain and resentment, and those ghosts poured out of the embroidery, rushing towards him and his men. Tsukiyomi Naraku's voice grew softer and softer until it was almost a whisper. When the red light faded, Yan Teixin and all the soldiers lay on the ground, their eyes wide open, their faces etched with extreme terror. The embroiderer. She never appeared again. Some say she transformed into that embroidery, some say she went far away, and others say she became a mountain spirit, continuing to punish evildoers with her embroidery skills. The story is over. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the faint sound of the whale oil lamp burning. Tsukiyomi Naraku looked at Daki, waiting for her reaction. Based on past experience, she would probably press for details at this point, or urge him to continue fabricating a sequel, or at least offer some commentary. But Daki did not. She remained leaning against the soft couch, a round fan resting on her lap, her dark red pupils gazing into the void, her brows slightly furrowed, as if deep in thought about something extremely important. That focused and solemn expression was completely different from her usual languid and charming demeanor. After waiting a moment, Tsukiyomi Naraku finally couldn't help but speak. "Miss, what's wrong? Is there something wrong with the story I told?" Daki snapped out of her daze and her gaze fell on his face. That look in his eyes was complex, as if he were scrutinizing or hesitating, and it also carried an emotion that Tsukiyomi Naraku couldn't decipher. "No." She shook her head gently, her voice slightly unsteady. "The story is very good. Why is that girl?" Tsukiyomi Naraku paused, then asked cautiously, "Is she facing some kind of trouble?" Daki remained silent for a long time. After a long silence, when Tsukiyomi Naraku thought she wouldn't answer, she finally spoke slowly, her voice so soft it was almost a soliloquy. "I'm just struggling with something." "What kind of thing?" Tsukiyomi Naraku asked instinctively. Daki looked up at him, her dark red pupils gleaming eerily in the candlelight. "Something? I don't know if I'll regret doing it." Tsukiyomi Naraku's heart skipped a beat. He maintained a calm expression, but inwardly he was furious. "Are you playing a riddle game with me? What could an upper moon demon like you be struggling with? The demon slayer core, perhaps. But that's not the way to put it." He thought for a moment, carefully choosing his words. "If the young lady is unsure about this matter, perhaps she could consider it from another perspective." "Oh," Daki raised an eyebrow. "What angle?" "Consider the impact this will have on you," Tsukiyomi Naraku said earnestly. "If you do it, will you regret it? If you do, how deep will your regret be? Can you bear the consequences?" He paused, then continued, "Conversely, if you didn't do it, would you regret it? If so, how deep would that regret be? Could you accept that regret?" Daki gazed at him silently, her eyes filled with even more complex emotions. Naraku Tsukiyomi met her gaze, his tone gentle yet firm. "Actually, every decision carries risk. The key isn't whether you'll regret it, but which consequence are you more willing to bear. If you do it, even if you'll regret it, but you feel you can handle the consequences, then do it. If you don't do it, even if you'll regret it, but you'd rather regret it than take the risk, then don't do it." He smiled and added, "Of course, this is just my humble opinion. You, young lady, are far more knowledgeable and should understand how to weigh the pros and cons better than I do." Daki did not respond immediately. She lowered her head, looking at the round fan on her lap, her fingertips gently tracing the patterns on the fan handle. The candlelight cast flickering shadows on her face, making her stunningly beautiful features appear almost unreal. After a long while, she suddenly burst out laughing. It wasn't the usual flirtatious or mocking smile, nor was it a feigned giggle, rather it was a smile that was very light, very faint, yet so real that it sent a shiver down your spine. Unexpectedly, she looked up, her dark red pupils reflecting the candlelight and the figure of Tsukiyomi Naraku. "You've got quite a few ideas." Dimensional gate hint, Daki's affection +5, current affection 60, unlock status, heartbeat, Daki's current state of mind, this human is not only interesting but also very intelligent. His words cleared up my previously chaotic thoughts considerably, and the way he was thinking so seriously actually made me a little. The prompt ends abruptly here, but Tsukiyomi Naraku's heart skipped a beat, heart palpitations. Affection level 60, status fluttering. If 50 is proof of longing and 60 is heart fluttering, then what is 70? Like, the moment this thought crossed her mind, Tsukiyomi Naraku felt a strange heat rise to her cheeks. He gazed at Daki's breathtakingly beautiful face in the candlelight, at the rare, genuine, gentle smile in her eyes, and his mind suddenly went blank. What is he thinking? She's a demon, the sixth upper moon demon, a vengeful spirit who has devoured countless people. Even if she had some interest in him, even if she might genuinely care about him, it was nothing more than the care she felt for a pet, the fondness for a toy. How could it possibly be? But what if the favorability rating really reaches 70, 80, or even 100? What if she really likes him? So what should he do? The idea was too dangerous, too absurd, causing Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart to pound wildly. He forced himself to look away, took a deep breath, and suppressed the turbulent thoughts surging in his mind. "You flatter me, young lady." His voice was a little strained. "I was just saying it casually, it might not be of any use." "It worked," Daki said earnestly, her fan beginning to wave gently again, but her gaze remained fixed on his face. "At least, it helped me understand some things." She didn't say what she had figured out, but Tsukuyomi Naraku could sense that the turmoil and confusion around her seemed to have dissipated considerably. "It's getting late." Daki suddenly stood up and walked to the window, though only heavy curtains hung outside. "Go back and rest. Tell me a story again tomorrow." "Yes," Tsukuyomi Naraku bowed, preparing to leave. "Wait," Daki called out to him. He turned around. Daki stood at the edge of the candlelight, half of her body hidden in shadow, her dark red pupils gleaming with an eerie light in the dimness. She looked at him for a long time before softly saying, "Thank you for tonight." Tsukuyomi Naraku was stunned. "Thanks. This upper moon demon who feeds on humans, this beautiful and dangerous evil spirit, is actually thanking him? You flatter me, young lady." He simply bowed and left the room. The paper door closed behind him, shutting out the candlelight in the room and that stunningly beautiful figure. Tsukuyomi Naraku stood in the corridor, the night breeze passing through it, bringing a touch of coolness. He raised his hand and touched his cheek. It was still burning. Heart palpitations. Affection level 60. He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. We must not panic. Absolutely, we must not panic. Regardless of Daki's feelings for him, and no matter how much affection she has for him, he must remain clear-headed. He's a time traveler. He's here to survive, not to fall in love, especially since his love interest is a cannibalistic demon. But involuntarily, the image of the rare, genuine gentleness in Daki's dark red eyes when she said thank you came to mind. And then there's the way she smiles, that chilling curve at the corner of her mouth. Damn it. Tsukuyomi Naraku muttered a curse under her breath, then turned and walked towards her room. My steps were a little unsteady and my heart was beating a little fast. He knew that some things were starting to get out of control. The price of losing control could be his life. Back in her room, the moment she closed the door, Tsukuyomi Naraku leaned against it, almost completely exhausted. My heart was still pounding, my cheeks were still burning, and the image of Daki saying thank you kept replaying in my mind. The rare gentleness in her dark red eyes, the genuine curve of her lips, and the way she stood at the edge of the candlelight, half her body hidden in shadow. I'm going crazy. I'm really going crazy. He muttered to himself, raising his hand to his chest, trying to calm his abnormally rapid heartbeat. But just then the gray door frame in my mind suddenly lit up. Dimensional gate hint. The affection level of the target Daki has exceeded 60, reaching the heartbeat state. Unlock stage rewards. Please select one from the following options. Option 1. Charm Enhancement Passive. Appearance plus 10, Charisma plus 10, increases attraction to ghosts by an additional 15%. Option 2. Physical Enhancement Passive. Base Constitution plus 20, Stamina plus 15, Recovery plus 10. Option 3. Enhanced Perception Passive. Intuition plus 15, Danger Perception range increased by 30%, increased sensitivity to negative emotions such as malice and murderous intent. Note: rewards will be optimized based on the host's current status and future development direction. Tsukuyomi Naraku paused for a moment, then calmed down. The reward for 60 points of favorability comes at just the right time. He carefully examined the 3 options. The charm boost sounded good. After all, Naraku's face was already eye-catching enough, and adding 10 points to his looks would probably make him outrageously beautiful. But for him now, the advantages brought by his appearance are almost saturated. Daki was already interested in his appearance, so further enhancements might not necessarily bring about a qualitative change. The enhanced senses are also very appealing. Intuition and the ability to sense danger are practically life-saving skills in the Demon Slayer world. Being able to detect malice and killing intent in advance means that one can react before danger arrives. Especially his current predicament, caught between demons and the Demon Slayer core. But in the end, his gaze fell on option 2, Body Strengthening. Base Constitution plus 20, Stamina plus 15, Recovery plus 10. This is what he needs most right now. Although the Blood Demon Ribbon Manipulation skill has been unlocked, it is still a skill that consumes stamina. With his current useless body, which has a combat power of 0.5, he would probably collapse from exhaustion after only a few uses. Moreover, without a sufficiently strong body, even the most powerful blood demon technique cannot unleash its true power. More importantly, he recalled Giyu Tomioka's fluid breathing technique from earlier that day, and the superhuman physical abilities displayed by the Demon Slayer Corps members as they fought against demons. To survive in this world, to gain power too. No longer just a toy that needs protection, the body is the foundation. I choose option 2, physical enhancement, he silently recited to himself. Select confirm reward adaptation in progress. Host has been detected to possess the special attribute Immortality 1 point, and the enhancement direction is being optimized. Optimization complete, gained passive ability, Immortality basic. Effect: each time the body suffers severe injury or is on the verge of collapse, if the host will remains intact, the body's overall strength will be slightly enhanced, including but not limited to strength, speed, endurance, recovery, and resistance. Current stage can withstand 3 near-death level attacks per day and complete the enhancement. Note 1. This ability complements the undying attribute. The stronger one's will, the more significant the enhancement effect. Note 2. The enhancement process will be accompanied by severe pain. Please use with caution. Note 3. The upper limit of body enhancement is unknown. Theoretically, it can grow indefinitely. Tsukuyomi Naraku was completely stunned. Immortal body, does getting stronger every time you suffer serious injury. He looked down at his hands, feeling the warm current flowing quietly through his body. That wasn't just ordinary growth in strength, it was a deeper transformation starting at the cellular level. He could feel his muscle fibers trembling slightly, his bone density slowly increasing, and his blood flow becoming more powerful. Holy shit, he couldn't help but swear. What if I turned into a ghost? Demons already possess the ability to regenerate infinitely. If this is combined with an immortal body, which increases physical strength with each injury, wouldn't that be invincible? The thought made his heart race, but he quickly gave a wry smile. This system is forcing me to become a ghost. Come to think of it, it makes sense. He already has blood demon arts, though he can't train it, the undying attribute, though only 1 point, and now he has the undying body. All his abilities are pointing in the same direction. To become an unkillable being that grows stronger with each battle. And ghosts are precisely such beings. No, it should be said that a ghost combined with these abilities is the truly perfect combination. But to become a demon means to drink Daki's blood, to become her kind, and also to stand against humanity. More importantly, after becoming a demon, will he be controlled by Muzan? In the original work, all demons' bloodlines originate from the demon king Muzan. Muzan can sense the existence of demons at any time and can even remotely control their bodies and read their thoughts. Even more terrifying, he can plant a curse inside a ghost, so that if the ghost reveals a secret about him or betrays him, it will die instantly. If Tsukuyomi Naraku becomes a demon, will he be able to break free from this control? System, he tentatively asked in his mind, if I become a demon, can I solve the problem of being controlled by Muzan? There was no response. As expected, the system doesn't answer this kind of question directly, but Tsukuyomi Naraku had a vague feeling that it should be possible. Since the system can grant him a reward like immortal body, since it can grant him the same blood demon art as Daki, since it can plant the immortal attribute of the spider lily within him. Perhaps the system really does have a way to allow him to maintain his independent will while becoming a demon, or even break free from Muzan's control. This guess made his heart beat even faster. If that's the case, then becoming a ghost is no longer a dead end but rather a path full of possibilities. He can become a demon, possessing immortality and immense power, but at the same time retain his humanity and not be controlled by Muzan. He could stay by Daki's side and perhaps he could even develop a deeper relationship with her. Moreover, with his immortal body, he can continuously grow stronger in battle. Combined with the evolutionary potential of blood demon art and the special abilities that the spider lily might grant. This temptation is too great, Tsukuyomi Naraku murmured to herself, her eyes growing brighter and brighter. But reason quickly pulled him back. Don't rush. Even if I were to become a ghost, it wouldn't be now. First, he needs to confirm whether the system actually has the ability to solve the problem of Muzan's control. Secondly, he had to wait until Daki's feelings for him were higher, at least until she truly couldn't bear to part with him and was willing to take risks for him. More importantly, he first needs to overcome the psychological barrier of cannibalism. As a modern person, the thought of him eating human flesh and drinking human blood makes my stomach churn. But becoming a demon is almost an inevitable choice, unless he can maintain his energy through sleep or other means like Nezuko, which requires a special constitution or opportunity. Perhaps. Tsukuyomi Naraku suddenly thought of a possibility. Since the system has physical enhancements, could it also have mental enhancements? With mental reinforcement, could he overcome his aversion to cannibalism, or could he find alternative food sources? He didn't know, but he felt that this possibility existed. After all, the system's rewards seemed tailor-made for him. The breath of equality prevented him from being seen as food by demons. His blood demon art shared the same origin as Daki's, and his undying body combined with the attributes of the spider lily. So if he really does become a ghost in the future, will the system also provide corresponding rewards to help him retain his humanity? Let's take it one step at a time. Tsukuyomi Naraku took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. He walked to the corner of the room, took out the packet of genuine red-dyed thread from his bag, and carefully took out a few petals of the spider lily he had secretly hidden away. The petals were already somewhat withered, but they still emitted a faint warmth that only he could perceive. Red spider lily, immortal attribute, immortal body, these are all his trump cards. What needs to be done next is to continue increasing Daki's favorability, continue to maintain the persona of an interesting human, and continue to survive in this dangerous predicament. When the time is right. He looked out the window. Though he could only see heavy curtains, he knew that outside lay the night of Kyoto, a world where demons and humans coexisted, a world he had to survive in. A ghost. He repeated the words softly, a complex smile slowly curving his lips. Perhaps it's worth a try, but before that, he has to live to see that day. Tsukuyomi Naraku carefully collected the spider lily petals, lay down on the tatami mat and closed her eyes. In my mind, the system's gray door frame floated silently. Host, Tsukuyo Naraku talent, breath of equality beginner, special attribute, immortality 1 point, passive ability, immortality basic, skill, blood demon art, ribbon manipulation, beginner, target of strategy, Daki affection 60-100 faction relationship, Oni faction subordinate, human faction potential connection. The road ahead is still long, but he had already seen the direction even if it was extremely risky. But he was a madman walking a tightrope. Having decided to want more, he was already prepared to take the risks. Now he needs to rest. He has to continue telling stories to Daki tomorrow. Thinking of this, the corners of Tsukuyomi Naraku's mouth unconsciously turned up again. That silly beauty, she's probably thinking about something right now, isn't she? About him, about whether or not to turn him into a ghost, about those emotions that even she herself couldn't explain. "Good night, Princess Warabi," he whispered, then drifted off to sleep. Outside the window, the night in Kyoto remained deep. In a dark room, Daki sat before her dressing table, her fingertips gently tracing her reflection in the mirror. In her dark red pupils, the candlelight shone, and so did the shadow of someone else. The unfamiliar feeling in her heart left her somewhat confused, yet also expectant. The following evening, the sky over Kyoto was tinged with a thin layer of crimson, and the clouds were like torn brocade, edged with gold and red. Tsukuyomi Naraku stood by the window of her room. The window paper was tightly sealed, and only a sliver of sunlight could be seen through the tiny gaps. He took a deep breath, feeling the warm current quietly surging within his body. The enhancement effect of the undying body was more significant than he had imagined. Overnight, his originally somewhat thin body seemed to have become more solid. He could feel the power hidden beneath the muscle lines when he raised his hand, and his 5 senses had become more acute. He could even hear the faint footsteps of the maids in the neighboring courtyard and smell the faint aroma of rice from the kitchen and the distant, almost imperceptible scent of blood. He looked down at his hands. His knuckles were distinct and his skin was smooth and supple. But when he clenched his fists last night, he could feel an unprecedented firmness emanating from the bones. The system's description of all-round improvement was not an exaggeration. He tried jumping in place, his body was incredibly light and he didn't even make a sound when he landed. Is this what it feels like to become stronger? He murmured to himself, a complex emotion welling up inside him. There was joy, a sense of security, but also a lingering unease. The power came too quickly and too easily, making it feel unreal to him. Moreover, the trigger condition for this immortal body is near-death damage, which means he must walk on the edge of life and death in order to continuously become stronger. But at least now he has some means to protect himself. Composing herself, Tsukuyomi Naraku began to tidy her appearance. He changed into the deep purple kimono that Daki had sent him yesterday. The fabric was of the finest Nishijin kimono, and the dark gold cloud pattern shimmered with a faint luster in the twilight. His belt was tied meticulously, and he also tied the carefully wrapped bundle of red-dyed thread to his waist. This was the evidence of his trip, and also a prop to conceal his true purpose. Finally, he carefully placed a few somewhat dried spider lily petals into a hidden pocket in his sleeve. Whenever his fingertips touched the cool petals, a strange warmth and sense of peace would well up in his heart. Everything is ready. He walked to the bronze mirror. The young man in the mirror had jet black hair, which was only partially tied up with a simple silver hairpin, while the rest was loose over his shoulders. Her dark red pupils appeared even deeper in the dim light, and her beautiful face had lost some of its initial paleness and fragility, gaining a more restrained radiance. He deliberately adjusted his expression, imbuing his brows with just the right amount of gentleness and melancholy. This was the Tsukuyomi Naraku that Daki was familiar with, and also the disguise he relied on for survival. Pushing open the door, I saw lanterns already lit in the corridor. The paper lanterns cast warm yellow glows, forming a winding ribbon of light in the deepening twilight. The air was filled with the scents of perfume, wine, and the sweet fragrance of late-blooming gardenias in the courtyard. In the distance, the faint sounds of a shamisen and a woman's laughter drifted in. The night in the red light district was awakening. Tsukuyomi Naraku walked along the corridor towards the secluded courtyard where Daki lived. The closer you get, the quieter it becomes, as if an invisible barrier isolates you from the hustle and bustle of the world. Only the sound of his own footsteps was exceptionally clear in the silent corridor. He stopped in front of the familiar paper door, which was thicker than the others. The light coming from inside the door was brighter than usual, and there was even a faint sound of a piano. The sound of the zither flowed like a stream, yet it carried an indescribable sense of loneliness and emptiness. It wasn't the kind of tune commonly found in nightclubs, used to liven things up or flirt. It was more like a whisper and a solitary outpouring. Tsukuyomi Naraku was somewhat surprised. He knew that Daki could play the zither, but in the few days since he arrived, she hadn't played for him yet, let alone produce such emotionally rich music. He stood still for a moment, waiting for the music to end and the lingering notes to fade before raising his hand and gently knocking on the door. Tap, 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 3 soft sounds with a steady rhythm. The music inside the door stopped completely. After a moment of silence, the voice of the fallen princess came, a few degrees colder than the sound of the zither but lacking some of her usual languid charm. Come in. Tsukuyomi Naraku pushed open the door and entered. The sight inside the room made him pause slightly. Today, Daki did not recline on the tatami mat as usual, nor did she languidly lean against the window. She sat upright at a low table in the center of the room, with an antique 7-stringed zither in front of her. The body of the instrument is made of deep rosewood, and the strings gleam with a cold, silvery light under the candlelight. She wore a very formal crimson tomesode kimono, the base color of which was a deep blood-red hue. The lapels, cuffs, and hem were embroidered with intricate spider lilies and intertwined floral patterns in gold thread, shimmering under the lamplight. Her long, black hair was not carefully styled into a bun as usual, but cascaded down her back like a waterfall, with only a few strands loosely tied up behind her ears with a long hairpin carved from red jade and depicting a spider lily. Her alluring and captivating beauty, highlighted by the contrast between her elaborate attire and bare hair, appeared even more breathtaking. Her eyes were slightly lowered, her long, thick eyelashes casting a small shadow beneath her eyelids, and her fingertips still lightly rested on the strings, as if the lingering notes of the music had not yet faded. The candlelight flickered across her face, casting a soft glow that softened her usual flamboyant and alluring features, giving her a serene, almost solemn beauty. Sit. She didn't look up but simply pointed to the seat opposite the low table. As instructed, Tsukuyomi Naraku sat upright opposite her. His gaze involuntarily fell again on the gyukin. Miss, you seem to be in a very high mood today. Daki finally raised her eyes, her dark red pupils meeting his. Her gaze was deep, as if scrutinizing him or perhaps looking through him to see something else entirely. I suddenly feel like playing. It's been so long since I've touched it, I'm a little rusty. Her tone was calm, but Tsukuyomi Naraku keenly caught a very subtle change in her expression. It wasn't the frustration of being unfamiliar that was the problem. Rather, it was more like a way to relieve a restless mind. You're too modest, young lady, he said gently. Just now, listening outside the door, it was like hearing celestial music. Doki gave a non-committal smile, a faint one that didn't reach her eyes. She reached out and plucked a string, producing a clear, melodious vibrato. What story have you prepared for today? She asked, her gaze returning to his face with its usual inquisitive look, yet seemingly more focused than ever before. Naraku Tsukuyomi composed herself and temporarily suppressed her doubts. The story I've prepared today might be a little unusual. He carefully chose his words. It's a story about monsters and humans, a yakai, Daki raised an eyebrow, her fingertips unconsciously tracing the strings of her kodo. Like a demon, some similarities yet some differences, Tsukuyomi Naraku said slowly. In that world, there are complete races of demons, half-demons, and powerful human priestesses and sorcerers. Today's story is about a half-demon, a girl from 500 years in the future who has traveled through time, and a priestess who has long since passed away. A half-demon. Traveling through time, Daki repeated softly, a bright light flashing in her dark red pupils, a sign of pure curiosity and interest being ignited. That sounds interesting, tell me. Tsukuyomi Naraku took a deep breath and began to narrate. His voice wasn't loud, but his enunciation was clear, his pace steady, and it carried a rhythmic quality reminiscent of recounting ancient legends. He began by recounting the turmoil of the Warring States period, depicting a world rife with demons and filled with fear. He spoke of Kikyo, the priestess who guarded the powerful Shiken jewel. She is powerful, holy, and lonely, bearing the mission of protection and purification, yet she is bound by fate because of it. He tells the story of Inuyasha, a half-demon rejected by both humans and demons. He is unruly, craves power, but deep down he harbors a hidden loneliness and a longing for recognition. The Shiken jewel, according to legend, can grant any wish of its holder, but it also contains endless evil and curses. Naraku Tsukuyomi's voice deepened. Kikyo and Inuyasha, one wanted to use the power of the jewel to turn Inuyasha into a true human, the other wanted to use the jewel to become a complete demon. Two lonely souls, drawn together by misunderstandings and conspiracies, were utterly torn apart just as they were about to touch each other. He described in detail how Onagumo, that cunning and treacherous demon formed from the combined evil thoughts of countless demons and humans, disguised himself as Inuyasha sowed discord, and caused Kikyo to use the sealing arrow to pin Inuyasha to the sacred tree, while he himself perished with the shattered jewel and endless resentment. 50 years later, Tsukuyomi Naraku continued, an ordinary middle school girl named Higurashi Kagome, through the bone eater's well in her family, traveled through time to the Sengoku period. She carried the reincarnation of Kikyo's blood, and thus she pulled out the sealing arrow, releasing Inuyasha. He talked about Kagome and Inuyasha's initial hostility and adjustment, their journey together to collect the Shiken jewel shards, and the warmth and vibrancy Inuyasha felt in Kagome that was completely different from Kikyo's. He also talked about Kikyo's resurrection, not a true resurrection, but a resentful and obsessive spirit that can only move by relying on grave soil and ashes and collecting souls by dead soulworms. Inuyasha was caught in an unprecedented struggle when faced with Kagome and Kikyo. Tsukuyomi Naraku's gaze became distant, as if he too was immersed in that tragic story. He felt an indelible guilt towards Kikyo, an unfulfilled promise and a deep-seated first love. Seeing Kikyo suffer in the world as a spirit, he couldn't abandon her. And towards Kagome, this always noisy yet sincere and courageous girl who stayed by his side, gradually illuminating his heart, a feeling he himself wasn't fully aware of was quietly blossoming. He recounted those agonizing moments, the desolate look on Kagome's face as she sat alone by the well, leaving Inuyasha behind to chase after Kikyo. Kikyo, carrying a cold resentment and an unyielding love, repeatedly pushes Inuyasha into difficult situations. Kagome was clearly heartbroken, yet she still chose to understand and even helped Inuyasha save Kikyo. Kagome once asked Inuyasha, "In your heart, who is more important, me or Kikyo?" Naraku Tsukuyomi's voice was soft, yet it carried a power that pierced the heart. Inuyasha couldn't answer. He couldn't deny his feelings for Kikyo, nor could he ignore Kagome's growing importance in his heart. This wavering and pain tormented him and also hurt the two women who loved him. When discussing Kikyo's fate, Tsukuyomi Naraku deliberately slowed his speech, each word seeming to carry weight. On the eve of the final battle with Onagumo, Kikyo exhausted her last strength to protect a village attacked by demons. She collapsed into Inuyasha's arms, her body gradually becoming transparent, transforming into countless dazzling points of light. His voice was a little hoarse. On her deathbed, she said to Inuyasha, "I can finally be free. I no longer have to bear the burden of a priestess, no longer be bound by resentment, and no longer love you." A long, deathly silence fell over the room. The wick of the whale oil lamp occasionally crackled softly, and the flame flickered uneasily, stretching, twisting, and shortening the shadows of the two figures on the wall. The air seemed to freeze, even the sweet, cloying incense seemed to have stopped flowing. Daki remained in the position of resting her chin on her hand, but her gaze had already shifted from Tsukuyomi Naraku's face, landing blankly on the flickering candlelight on the corner of the low table. Her expression was calm, almost blank but deep within her dark red pupils. It seemed as if a raging storm was churning, with countless complex and incomprehensible emotions colliding and tearing each other apart. Tsukuyomi Naraku could see her hand resting on her knee, her fingers unconsciously curling up, the fingertips slightly white. Her delicate jawline was taut, and her breathing became light and drawn out as if she were trying her best to suppress something. He didn't urge them but simply waited quietly. He knew that this story touched on something that even Daki herself might not have been clearly aware of, or something she was unwilling to confront. After a long time, so long that Tsukuyomi Naraku almost thought time had stopped, Daki took a very slight, almost inaudible breath. And then, her voice was lower and softer than before, with a barely perceptible hoarseness. What happened to that girl named Kagome and that half-demon? Naraku Tsukuyomi slowly shook his head. In the story I know, there's no final ending yet. They continue their journey, continue collecting the shards of the Shiken Jewel, continue fighting Naraku and his minions. Kikyo's death became an unhealable wound in Inuyasha's heart, while Kagome. She still chose to stay by Inuyasha's side with her courage, kindness, and that unwavering love she couldn't stop, even knowing he harbored feelings for someone else. He paused, then added, perhaps the cruelest and most moving part of this story is that there's no perfect answer. Love, responsibility, guilt, obsession, letting go, moving forward, all these intertwine to form an unpredictable and unseverable thread of fate. Daki didn't ask any more questions. She remained silent, slowly lowering her eyes, her thick eyelashes completely concealing the emotions within. Her fingertips resting on the strings trembled very slightly. Tsukuyomi Naraku could clearly feel that a heavy and sorrowful atmosphere enveloped the entire room. It wasn't a matter of whether his storytelling was good or bad, but rather that the core of the story itself, forbidden emotions, an insurmountable chasm, eternal regret and struggle, resonated deeply and subtly with the listener before him. What was she remembering? Was it a wish she hadn't fulfilled as a human? Is it the loneliness of becoming a demon, relying solely on her beloved older brother for survival, yet being an enemy of the entire world? Or perhaps the complex emotions she felt for him, a human she shouldn't care about, emotions that even she couldn't quite understand. Dimensional gate hint, Daki's affection +5, current affection 65, unlocked status, deep resonance. Daki's current state of mind, half-demon and human, priestess and ghost, an inescapable fate, eternal regret and struggle. This story is like a mirror reflecting things I've never dared to think about in detail. Why did he tell this story? Was it a coincidence or was he implying something? Was his concern for me, like in the story, destined to be filled with pain and unresolved issues? Deep resonance. The favorability rating has reached 65. Looking at the system notification, Tsukuyomi Naraku felt that the inexplicable emotion in her heart not only did not dissipate but became even heavier. He could sense that this increase in goodwill was different from the previous interesting, useful, and pleasant feelings. This is a deeper level of emotion, touching upon the levels of feelings and the meaning of existence. He looked at Daki's silent profile, her features appearing both exceptionally fragile and exceptionally beautiful in the candlelight, and a strong impulse suddenly welled up within him. He wanted to say something to comfort her, to tell her the story was just a story. But the words caught in his throat and he swallowed them back. What could he say? Don't be sad, or we're different from them. Between them lies more than just a chasm of race and stance. It is a divide between life and death, predator and prey, eternity and fleeting moment. It's more hopeless and unsolvable than the relationship between Inuyasha and Kikyo or Kagome. Just then Daki's body jolted violently. She abruptly raised her head, all the contemplation, sadness, and confusion on her face vanishing in an instant, replaced by extreme vigilance and a hint of barely concealed fear. Her pupils contracted sharply as if ice were shattering within the deep crimson depths. A trace of her previously restrained aura leaked out uncontrollably, a cold and violent pressure belonging to the upper moon 6, causing the temperature in the room to plummet and the candlelight to flicker wildly, almost extinguishing. Naraku Tsukuyomi had never seen such an expression on her face before. Even when facing the pillars of the Demon Slayer core, she only felt anger, killing intent, and arrogance she never felt. Fear, go back to your room. Daki's voice rang out, icy and chilling, resolute and commanding, carrying an unquestionable absolute authority, now immediately. No matter what noise you hear, do not come out. Close the door, absolutely do not make a sound, and do not try to sense anything outside. Startled by the sudden turn of events and the sternness in his tone, Tsukuyomi Naraku's heart pounded. She instinctively stood up. Miss. What happened? Go now, Doki shouted sharply, her voice even carrying a rare hint of anxiety and Pleading, Tsukuyomi Naraku no longer hesitated. He knew that what could make Daki lose her composure like this was a danger far beyond his imagination. He immediately bowed, yes. After saying that, he turned and quickly left the room. He didn't even have time to fully close the paper door. He just hurriedly closed it and walked quickly along the corridor back to his room without looking back. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, and my back was instantly soaked with cold sweat. He could sense that shortly after he left the room, an indescribable, cold, viscous, and terrifying pressure was quietly spreading from all directions, enveloping the entire Kyogokuya and even a wider area. What is that? He didn't dare to think too much about it. He practically burst through his bedroom door, slipped inside, and slammed the door shut behind him, even pulling the inner latch on. Leaning against the cold door, he gasped for breath, trying to calm his heart, which felt like it was about to explode. Inside Daki's room, after the sound of Tsukuyomi Naraku's hurried footsteps faded away, the last trace of human emotion on Daki's face vanished completely. She quickly straightened her clothes and hair, then walked to the center of the room and with utmost respect, even humility, slowly knelt down, bowing deeply until her forehead pressed against the cold tatami mat. Her body trembled slightly, not entirely from fear, but more from an instinctive awe and submission ingrained deep in her soul in the face of absolute authority. The air in the room seemed to have been sucked out, becoming incredibly heavy and viscous. The originally warm, dim candlelight was now strangely distorted and dimmed, as if suppressed by an invisible force. Shadows poured out wildly from every corner of the room, the gaps in the cabinets, the folds in the curtains, the seams in the floor. No longer merely a lack of light, but a thick, almost liquid darkness that rolled and converged before Daki. The darkness gradually condensed and took shape, eventually transforming into a tall and slender figure. He was a man dressed in a well-tailored, expensive black Western-style suit. His smooth black hair was meticulously combed back, revealing a handsome face that was almost otherworldly. His skin was deathly pale, like the finest cold jade, gleaming with an inhuman luster in the dim light. What was most chilling were his eyes, crimson-red pupils as vibrant as poisoned gemstones, yet devoid of any human emotion, only an unfathomable, absolute indifference and an all-powerful superiority. He stood there casually, yet he exuded an irresistible and terrifying aura. That is the absolute power that transcends all ghosts, belonging to the Source and the Ghost King. The air seemed to freeze around him, the light bent toward him, and space itself seemed to be slightly distorted by his presence. Muzan Kibutsuji, Daheim. He spoke, his voice gentle and melodious like the low hum of a cello, yet every syllable carried a bone-chilling coldness striking at Daki's nerves. Daki lowered her body even further, her voice unusually tense with extreme respect. Lord Muzan, you've been doing well lately. Muzan approached slowly, his expensive leather shoes making no sound as they stepped onto the tatami mat. He stopped in front of Daki, looking down at her condescendingly. You've taken care of a few more Demon Slayer core pillars, very efficient. I've been watching your performance closely. This is all thanks to the power bestowed upon me by Lord Muzan. Daki dared not raise her head, her voice escaping from her lips pressed to the ground. This subordinate dares not claim credit. You are always so humble. Muzan chuckled softly, but there was little genuine joy in his laughter. He extended his pale, almost transparent fingers, the tips icy cold, and gently lifted Daki's chin, forcing her to look up at him. Their eyes met. Daki could clearly see her own pale, terrified face reflected in Muzan's crimson pupils. His fingertips felt like the cold tongue of a snake, sending a chill down her spine and straight to the top of her head. She forced herself to maintain a respectful and submissive gaze, not daring to reveal the slightest abnormality. Muzan scrutinized her, a barely perceptible hint of doubt flashing in his eyes. Strangeness. Based on his understanding of Daki, he knew she would follow his lead and, as she had done countless times before, use a coquettish posture that mixed dependence, admiration, and flattery to get closer to him, looking at him pitifully, with her beautiful eyes saying flattering things like, "It's all thanks to Lord Muzan's excellent teaching." Trying to gain more of his attention and rewards. But today she simply maintained a stiff head-up posture, her gaze respectful yet distant and restrained, her body even trembling slightly from excessive tension. Like a small animal that had been frightened but was forcibly calming itself down. Has she grown up? Is she finally no longer that little girl who showed her emotions so easily, acted willfully, and needed him to constantly nudge and guide her? Do you know how to restrain yourself, how to maintain appropriate boundaries, and how to show proper respect in his presence? Muzan withdrew his hand, his fingertips seemingly still carrying the cool, delicate touch of Daki's chin. He turned away from her and walked to the window. Though there were only heavy curtains there, his gaze seemed to penetrate everything. Very good. He spoke calmly, his tone revealing no obvious emotion, but Daki keenly caught a hint. A barely perceptible satisfaction. You seem to have matured a bit, to know how to restrain yourself, to know how to be respectful, which is good. I've always hoped you could be more composed. Daki's heart eased slightly but remained pounding. Thank you for the compliment, Master Muzan. Muzan did not respond immediately. He seemed to be looking at a view that didn't exist outside the window, or perhaps he was sensing something. The air in the room remained heavy and suffocating. Recently, there are several newly promoted pillars in the Demon Slayer Corps that require special attention. Muzan's voice regained its usual coldness and authority. Information will be sent to you and Jutaro later. You must be cautious, especially regarding that new water pillar Tomioka Giyu. According to reliable sources, he has been frequently active near Kyoto recently, seemingly investigating something. Yes, I understand. Daki replied immediately, but her heart skipped a beat at the mention of the name Tomioka Giyu, the pillar who saved Naraku. Muzan specifically mentioned him. Was it a coincidence, or